Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 146. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined by my son, Chris Raygun. Chris, how are you today?
I'm all right. It's rainy, which is not my favorite weather, but, you know, as long as I shut the windows and pretend like the outside isn't real, it doesn't really matter that much.
That's what I do every day, regardless of the weather. I like the rain. I enjoy a little bit of rain. I enjoy a little bit of melancholy in my life. Really brings me up, actually, from my usual dourness. Oh, yeah. Jeez. Yeah, I love the rain. You look very handsome today. Your hair's a little bit like messy. You got a little bit of a messy hair thing, which I like.
Yeah, I got out of the shower like kind of recently, and it's my hair's at that length now where there's just there's no real outside of like stepping into a microwave. There's no real way to dry it with reasonable time. So I just have to like let the world help me. But
sure. Okay.
We'll see.
Dustin Furman,
hello,
executive producer of Last Stand Media, here with us as usual. How are you today, Dustin?
I'm fine. It's been a fine day. I finished paying my taxes yesterday, so I'm still feeling that wound a little bit, that thievery. But other than that, though, I'm fine. I'm going on a little weekend trip this weekend, so just getting through these last few days here, and then, party time.
Hell yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm not going anywhere, so nothing's happening in my world. I'll be here if you guys need me. But it's good to see you both. And on this Thursday when we record, of course, the show goes live on Fridays over on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. We are at an all-time high right now with patrons, and we really appreciate your love, kindness, and support over there. We could not do this show without you. We also couldn't do Defining Duke without you and Knockback without you, our other two podcasts about Xbox and nostalgia, respectively. And so go over there, patreon.com/laststandmedia. Support us if you can. $1, $2, $5 a month and more, depending on the perks you want. You can get your name in the credits. That's kind of the highest end perk, but the sweet spot where most people are is the $5 a month spot, and that's where you get early ad-free access to all the shows, the ability to submit questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas to our show, access to our supplemental episode of Sacred Symbols each and every week that is only for patrons. Last week, it was kind of a little bit of a surprise, Dustin, because, and we're going to talk about it in a few moments. We're a little late on this just based on the scheduling of the show, but there was an explosive article published on Bloomberg, which we'll get into, and we'll get Chris's opinions on this for the first time. And so we were actually supposed to interview Punk Rock MBA, and we had to cancel that or at least push that back, because we wanted to do a show all about that article. So people can go listen to that. My last 10-minute rant that was making the rounds everywhere is now on YouTube and doing really well. And we really appreciate it. And we were missing Chris that day, so I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts on everything. But before we get into that, let's see, anything else? Oh, merch, laststandmedia.shop. We have our Vita Means Death merch over there. We're going to be rolling out more, I think, next week, so keep an eye out for that. Of course, for people that are unfamiliar, Sony won't be celebrating Vita, so we will celebrate Vita's demise with some cool merch, and eventually I hope stickers and posters. We're basically commissioning various talented artists to give us their interpretation of the theme of death having to do with Vita, and it's been pretty cool. So I really appreciate everyone's kindness in that regard. Okay, before we move forward, a couple more things that I wanted to talk about, guys. On April 20th of 2011, all right, so it could very well be, that's 420, by the way.
Yeah.
But April 20th, 2011, the PlayStation Network went down for 24 consecutive days. Depending on when you hear this, it might be actually the day of this happening, but we're around that. Chris, I'm wondering, like, what are your feelings on that? That was 10 long years ago, probably the most traumatic moment for the PlayStation brand ever.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it was 10 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. What do you think?
Yeah, it is crazy, because I remember I didn't have a PlayStation 3 at this time. I think I got a PS3 in 2012 when my half sister and her husband moved in. They were like, "We got a PS3. We don't use it. You can play it." That was my introduction to everything. I was like going back to Infamous and all that. And I remember the year prior very, very vividly because it was so unprecedented. It was like that was the only time I'd ever remembered anything like that happening to like a widespread, like a really popular subscription service, or I guess not a subscription service because at the time it wasn't. You didn't have to pay for online back then. But that outage sticks out still to like when I think about PlayStation, I think about all like the games that I grew up with and all the franchises that I enjoy and all the games that I like, but I also think about that outage. Like it really is something that's so like uniquely terrible, and it like killed SOCOM. That was a big moment in time, even for people who were like off the platform.
Indeed, it happened the week that SOCOM 4 came out, and also Portal 2 came out that week, and that was going to be a big co-op game, as you guys might recall as well. So it was, I think SOCOM was out for like maybe a day or two, and that ended up having really a ripple effect for Zipper, which died as a result of that. They released Unit 13 on Vita, which I think is a really great game, but then they went belly up, and Vita killed other studios too, like Big. So, Dustin, what are your memories of the great PlayStation outage?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember it, but it didn't really affect me that much because I think I was with Chris in that generation. I was a 360 focused gamer, I guess. And now a lot of that came down to the fact that, around the timing, I was very, very into Halo. The Xbox 360 was much more affordable, but I did have a PS3 at this time. So it was like I knew about it, and I was more the main factor for me is when it was over was getting those free games that they handed out as like a hey, sorry. And I recall a conversation with my dad where he was like, "Hey, was our credit card on the PS3? I heard about this hack." You know, I was like, well, there's some kind of credit monitoring thing that they're giving out if you want that. I'm like, okay. And then I don't think we ever spoke of it ever again after that.
Right.
Is that a very, very accurate impression of your dad?
No, it probably isn't. It's how it is in my mind, though. My dad's not like
He doesn't enunciate.
No, I don't know. That's how I imagine in my mind, because he's just like the look from your dad, like the concern, like, hey, like that. That was very much he wasn't mad at me, of course, or anything.
No. Well, you didn't hack the PlayStation Network, so.
Yeah.
I remember this well. I mean, I was at IGN, we covered it, and I remember that well because we were talking about, did it affect you personally or not? It affected me in the sense that I just stopped playing games for like the entire time it was out because I was kind of like, first of all, we couldn't even download anything, couldn't download patches. It kind of had this weird knock-on effect of couldn't sing trophies and do all of that. And then, I remember the free games, like Infamous, I think, was one free game. I think Dead Nation was another free game. So those are obviously good gets. But yeah, it was a strange time. And I just can't believe it was 10 years ago. So those 24 somber days.
Yeah, I just remember it being a big deal because I was in the 360 at that point too, and like so were all my friends, and I had some friends who were on PlayStation, and I just remember a friend of mine being like, "This is why we pay," and that sticks out to me still. Like I remember this, like this is why we pay, and I didn't really agree with that back then, really, but it was kind of hard to argue at the time. It's like, things don't go down for like 25 days, 24 days. That is a crazy amount of time. I don't think people like really appreciate how long that is for. Like, imagine if like Twitter was down for like 24 days, or like YouTube was down for 24 days. That's like catastrophically long for an internet service. Crazy.
What were you going to say, Dustin?
I was just saying there would be, if Twitter went down for 24 days, we might achieve world peace. I mean,
can you imagine?
Who knows the possibilities?
It'd be a blessing. I was just thinking about that as I scrolled through Twitter. I'm like, it's just always negative. I don't know.
It's that meme. It's that meme with like the futuristic city, you know?
Yeah,
right. Exactly. Yeah. With it is a weird program, but yeah, the PSN outage was strange. I mean, the way it was explained to me at the time by experts was they were, because I think there was like problems, and then as I remember, the PSN stayed up for like a half a day, and then they basically just pulled the plug. I mean, the way it was described to me was like they just pulled the plug out of the wall because it was so fucked up, and there was like such a breach that they needed to sever like basically all outside connection to the PlayStation Network, and it took them 3.5 weeks to fix it. And even at that point, people will remember things were still coming online. There was like a map and everything that they had. It was actually kind of fun, and we did a famous episode of Podcast Beyond about it that people still bring up, and so there was like a bit of PlayStation unity at that time too. But I think it was impressive that they survived and thrived, because this was when they were starting to kind of figure it out. 2009 was like Uncharted 2, and we just had, we're about to get Infamous 2, and all 2011, 2012 is when a lot of good games came out. So yeah, it was interesting that happened 10 years ago. And for those that have been with the brand, we remember. Just real quick, Sony London is hiring right now for a brand new next gen IP. I didn't know that it was newsworthy enough to put into the news itself, but good news for them. We don't hear very much from a London studio. They are a very casual-based studio. They're known best for SingStar and iToy and all that kind of stuff. But in recent years, they did Wonder Book in 2012, of course, for PS3. And then they did PlayStation VR Worlds, which was kind of the bundle in. And Blood and Truth for PlayStation VR as well. So we'll see what is up with them, but not much else to say at this moment. And then finally, before we move on, I just wanted to note Ubisoft Forward has been announced for June 12th. So this is the new Ubisoft kind of, what do you want to call it? Like Nintendo Direct style thing that they do. And that will be during E3. So check that out. They have a blog post about that. So we'll be keeping an eye out for that on June 12th. Dustin, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, because your video disappeared. So I don't know if you were still there.
I still see
I'm flickering in and out like
do you see him,
ghost.
Chris? You do? Oh, yeah. I don't know. Well, it must be me then. All right, boys, let's get into what we're playing. We'll start with you, Chris, more Oddworld Soulstorm.
Yeah, I'm still knocking my way through this. I've come around on it quite a bit. The opening stages are significantly less engaging than some of even just like the earlier stages that are just after the intro. It really opens up into this kind of staggeringly like impressive. It's almost like, I don't want to say open world because that's not really accurate. It's a 2D side scroller, but the levels are so big and so multi-dimensional that in the background you'll see all these like these vistas and like these structures that are actually like real geometry that you will actually like end up later on. And I just it's really impressive. I don't think I've seen level design quite like this in any other 2.5D or whatever the hell. They're calling it like 2.9D, which is like weird and kind of markety, but it really is different because I don't really like 2.5D. It was one of the main things that put me off of the actual game part of like Little Big Planet and things like that. The going like in and out is just like
I couldn't take it.
I liked making shit in that, but like aside from that, 2.5D usually bothers me, but something about the way it's handled in Oddworld and just the nature of the game, it's just all about you like freeing these like slave laborers, and there's like this weird like completionist mentality that it kind of like unlocks in you. It's not the most polished experience, I think, but there's a surprising depth to the physics in it. There's like there's more ways to solve problems than you would think there are in like a 2D game that's not necessarily based on action in the way that a lot of other 2D games are. It's shockingly impressive, but it's also one of those things that I can tell is not going to be for a lot of people because it is so niche and so weird and in a lot of ways very off-putting just from the tone and some of the imagery is like really really unsettling. But I like it a lot more than I did in the early like first stages. And it's really opening up, and it's one of the few games that I've played too where the crafting system isn't annoying, which I like.
I'm interested in how it's doing. It's hard to tell. I mean, I was just kind of anecdotally looking at PlayStation profiles, PSN profiles while you were talking just to see. And it has 5,000 owners, so it's doing, and that's an opt-in site, so that's pretty good for a PS5. But I don't know what the nature of its sales expectations are or anything like that. I don't feel like I'm I mean, it's all anecdotal, but I don't feel like I'm hearing many people talk about it. I'm not seeing it on my timelines.
Yeah.
And all these various things. So I am most curious about that, but I hope it does do well. I really like Warren Lanning a lot. I have an affinity for that man. In real life, he's always been very nice to me. Dustin, did you mess around anymore with Oddworld?
No, and that's the thing. I'm having a hard time getting attached to any game right now. And I was feeling a little bit like a poser when I was playing Oddworld Soulstorm, because I was like, I have no fucking clue what's going on.
Yeah, well, so there you go.
I thought, hey, if I play this, maybe I should go back and play New and Tasty first.
Yeah. It would be wise to at least know what happens in New and Tasty before you jump into it, because it really is. It's like jumping into the second Lord of the Rings movie. You know, it's like it just immediately you're just like, who's that? Like they're not going to really. It's not super friendly for like new people, which is like curious. It's actually kind of interesting that they went that route, because surely they had to know that there were going to be a lot of people. Like this is like a PS5, free with Plus game, and maybe that wasn't always the plan. I'm sure it wasn't, but even the older Oddworld games had a recap thing in the main menus where you could be like, what the hell happened before this, and it would tell you. So it's curious that they didn't do that for this, but
it's funny.
It's good. I like it.
You mentioned going into the second Lord of the Rings. When Game of Thrones was ending, I was at my parents' house and visiting, and so Holly and I were like, we're gonna watch this. My mom's like, well, I'll watch it with you guys. So my mom has seen one episode of Game of Thrones, and it was the very last episode. She's like, I don't get why you guys are so upset, but it seemed kind of cool. Like, well,
you know what's funny? I've also seen one episode of Game of Thrones, and it is also the last one.
Oh, whoa. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
No idea.
That last season's rough. People are talking about Game of Thrones again now for some reason. I don't know why. But
because the Twitter account tweeted, winter is coming.
We already know. It already came.
And it was underwhelming.
Now.
I think it was Ryan McCaffrey pointed out that clearly had to be a misscheduled tweet. Like they fucked up and put the wrong year on the tweet.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, using TweetDeck or Hootsuite or something.
Right.
You're probably totally right about that. That
was Ryan McCaffrey that said that, and I think he's right.
Guy.
He's right.
Very smart guy. Dustin, you're playing Pac-Man 99.
Right. So yeah, that's what, as I was saying earlier, I'm having a hard time getting attached to a game right now, and I think it's because I'm starting to feel like strong anticipation for Nier Replicant, which is next week, and then right after that, Returnal. And then right after that, Resident Evil 8. And it sucks because I know my brain has this problem where it's like, it thinks there's some weird part of my brain. It's like newer is better and more interesting. It's like there are plenty of amazing games that I could play right now, but like something about it's just like, yeah, but I really wish I was playing this game that's not out yet, or I'm just waiting, or I'm afraid that I'm going to get too attached into something and I won't be done by the time that game I'm anticipating comes out. And then it's all fucked up at that point. So with that being said, I just put Pac-Man 99 because I was very surprised. Wasn't very much into Tetris 99 or Mario 50, I think, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Pac-Man 99, though, strong. A lot of people say it's like the Pac-Man Championship game. It's like really, really addicting and really fun. And it's free if you have Nintendo Switch Online. I'm wondering if they can bring it to other consoles, because I know that Bandai Namco, like their splash screen is at the beginning. So either way, it's a neat little thing where it's like, you know, someone says Pac-Man Battle Royale and you instantly think that is the dumbest thing you've ever heard. But then when you actually play it, it's like, oh, this actually works out pretty well. This is pretty cool.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I finally beat Wild Arms 3.
You did it.
And platinumed it. And took over 150 hours. I did it in 3 weeks and 3 days. Was it worth it? No. What I said to someone on Twitter, they were like, why are you doing this to yourself? And I'm like, well, Buddhist monks prove their discipline by going, eschewing modernity, right? And living in cloaks and eating bowls of rice. And I show my discipline by occasionally platinuming really, really cumbersome, long Japanese role-playing games like I did last year with Dragon Quest XI. Although I like Dragon Quest XI. Wild Arms 3 took longer. It's way worse. And there was just something like the last week or so that I was playing it, I just would sit down and shut my brain off and just be like, this is and because Micah kept asking me too, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing this. Like, I am not only beating this fucking game, this just I remembered it all flooded back to me of why I couldn't stand Wild Arms 3, and yet I needed to see it through. And a couple of interesting things that I noted in the credits. Number one, it was translated and localized by Squaresoft. Squaresoft was actually cited, and this was, of course, came out the year before Squaresoft merged with Enix and became Square Enix. So that was interesting. So Sony actually, it's a second-party game made by Mediavision, and they actually got Squaresoft to localize it. So it's actually a wonder it even came out here at all. And then the second thing, Shuhei Yoshida is the associate producer listed on the game out of Japan Studio.
Your boy.
So that was pretty interesting. Although that's a term that's just thrown around. I'm sure he was just organizing things. Obviously, he didn't work with Mediavision itself, who still exists. The team still exists. But yeah, it was an interesting test of will. And what's so funny, Chris, because you asked, like, was it worth it? I'm like, no, it wasn't worth it. And yet, and this kind of goes to Dustin's point, and yet, I don't know what else I would have played. It was almost like, okay, like I beat it. I platinumed it. I synced the trophies. I tweeted out as I always do. And then I deleted it off my console. And I'm like, you know what? Beat the shit out of that game, didn't I? Yeah. So it was this weird sense of satisfaction. But now I'm really eager to get into this evening another Square Enix game, or a Square Enix game, Outriders. By People Can Fly. You thought I was going to maybe say Saga Frontier, but I don't hate myself that much. Although I might hate myself that much, so we'll see.
Yeah.
In the coming weeks how much but Dustin, to your point, Outriders and then Returnal, only 15 days away from when we're recording this, so 2 weeks or so, very exciting. And then Resident Evil. So we're moving. You know, we're starting to I believe it or not, games are coming out. And Mass Effect Legendary Edition comes out in May, and I'm not going to play that, but things are happening.
Yeah.
Things are happening.
But boys, not all the things that are happening are good.
No.
And it's time to get into the news. Number one. Now, Dustin, you and I discussed this last week on Sacred Symbols Plus. People can go listen to that episode. We are going to kind of encapsulate all of the news, including updates that have happened since that we were not able to talk about. And then I'm going to kick it to Chris, because we've not yet heard from this young gentleman about all of the news. So let's read this first. Number one. Since we last recorded, a complicated and incredibly consequential and controversial story arrived out of publisher Bloomberg. This article, entitled "Sony's Obsession with Blockbusters is Stirring Unrest Within PlayStation Empire," cited a number of anonymous sources that had some interesting things to say. For starters, the much-rumored second team in San Diego is real. I could have told you that. I mean, we talked about it a lot. It was spun off from Sony's internal roving visual arts service group, and they originally wanted to pitch a remake of Uncharted, before settling on, of all things, a remake of The Last of Us. Sources claim the studio went largely unfunded, unnoticed, and unsupported, and has since mostly been broken up back to their constituent parts within Sony. Herman Holst apparently said no to that project, that it was too expensive, what they were working on. I said, no. Like, who was that? Makembe Mutombo? What was that guy? You know, wasn't that his name? Mutombo, the guy that played on the Rockets?
What are you asking?
You know, the guy that used to do this, like he would block a shot.
You mean
he was a basketball player?
It was a sports thing.
See,
he would block a shot, and you're thinking of Seinfeld.
I'm thinking of Babu.
Yeah, of course. I love in the last episode when they have just a shot of him doing this, like, and they just like kind of stay on it for like a beat too long. It's pretty good. No, that makes sense. I think some sports fans out there will understand what I'm saying. But Herman Holst said no, and the team was kind of broken back off into their constituent parts. So what ended up happening is with the Last of Us remake, the Last of Us remake that they had pitched and were working on was then taken by Naughty Dog. This makes little sense since The Last of Us is an 8-year-old game that already runs on PS4 natively, but Bloomberg author Jason Schreier did note on a recent podcast appearance that The Last of Us is an internal project Naughty Dog is undertaking, in part because it's waiting for potential various projects to be greenlit, a sign of botched internal resources. Meanwhile, the truly explosive revelations in the piece are actually about Bend Studio, the Sony-owned Oregon-based team that made Days Gone. The game apparently outsold every other game the studio ever made combined, according to its director, Jeff Ross, who, after the article was published, appeared on David Jaffe's Twitch stream. And we're working on getting Jaffe on the show, by the way. So just answering that question preemptively, where he called into question some of Schreier's reporting. That said, the Bloomberg article notes that Bend unsuccessfully pitched Days Gone 2 to Sony and were denied. Oddly, Bend's autonomy was then stripped of them as they were pushed to do a new Uncharted game, which they worked on for over a year before the team's leadership was asked Sony to be removed, which they were. They are now apparently working on something new at Bend, though it was only greenlit in the last couple of months, meaning they are years away from having anything. For Jeff Ross's part, who is the only on-the-record ex-Bend employee to sound off on this article in any way, some of it's true and some of it's not. That said, Ross did send a strange tweet out after appearing on David Jaffe's show, and this has gone unreported. I don't know why. No one's noticing this. He says, quote, that in part, Schreier has the luxury of being able to be more honest than I'm allowed. End quote. Chris, there's a lot there, but what do you make of this article and all of the hullabaloo? I mean, what's most attractive to you to talk about?
I mean, the thing that obviously stands out the most is the seeming disorganization at Sony. This seems like first of all, I mean, beyond just the unreasonable reliance on The Last of Us, just that to me was like the big thing. And I tweeted about this a couple times too. It's like the audacity to remake The Last of Us, a game that already runs on PS4 and by extension PS5 just fine. Instead of just like doing the thing that everybody wants, which is just a 60 frames, 4K patch, which they've been doing with a lot of games, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, a couple others. Just the audacity of focusing on that instead of the several key PlayStation franchise that are stranded on PS3, a service which is about to shutter and go down, is just really annoying to me. And it just seems to me like they don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know who the hell asked for a Last of Us remake. I don't think anybody wants this. No. And just the idea that like Resistance is just sitting there. These Sly games are just sitting there. The older Infamous games are just sitting there. What are you doing? If you want to like dip into the past and like, do that stuff and like maybe do like a remake of a game that's like older, that's totally cool. Like, fine. Do something with Resistance. Do something with these franchises that are just unaccessible on your modern hardware instead of dipping into something. It seems like they're just quadruple dipping, I already thought The Last of Us Remastered was a bit weird a year afterwards. I thought it was
agree.
All right.
Their argument at that time was that they were trying to learn the PS4, which is cool, and I get that. And so I whether or not that's really they needed to or not, I understand moving from PS3 to PS4 was really weird for everyone, especially internally. I mean, imagine outside.
Yeah.
But the move from PS4 to PS5 is not anything like that.
Yeah, so. It's fair enough, but I remember even at the time, it was just like, this seems a bit bizarre to me. So the idea that they're doing it again, there's going to be 3 The Last of Us Part 1s, technically. That's so weird.
It's absurd, and I also am curious to follow up on another one of your tweets, Chris, before we bring Dustin back in. I got to follow up on this, though. I think you and I are on the same page, just the incredible disrespect shown to Bend. I do not understand what the hell is up with that. There's something up with that. Because my contention continues to be to this day, 2 years after the game came out, that part of the reason that Days Gone didn't do as well as it should have is Sony PR's fault. By letting that game go early and letting it go unpatched, which is unheard of. And it just was a totally different game beginning in patch 1.3. Everyone knows that now. And no one that bought the game day of or after that ever played any other version of it. So they did a great disservice to it. But then they also had them work on an engine that they don't own, and they learned it. They made a new game and a new IP, and then they pitch an obvious sequel, and then they're not allowed to take advantage of any of that. And then they're put on an Uncharted game that they don't want to make, and then they have 18 months of their time wasted, to the point where it seems like their project, which is a new IP, which is awesome, that's exciting, I have no problem with that at all. I mean, Days Gone 2, okay, that's no problem, but you can't get that 18 months back. I don't know who thought it was reasonable to treat Bend like a bunch of serfs after making Days Gone. Why would you do that to them? That's so weird. And I think no matter what Jeff says, he says he left on good terms. I believe that, but I think that they lost some guys because of what happened there, including, of course, some of their leaders, like John Garvin, who wrote all of their games. So anyway,
it does put into perspective those departures. Those departures make a lot more, because I remember at the time that they were happening, we were kind of like confused as to why they would do that, because Days Gone did so well.
Right. I remember, Chris, just to interrupt, I'm sorry, John Garvin, we didn't even know for a year that he left. So it actually really puts it into context, right, about when he left, which was in like the end of 2019, it seems like.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I don't think necessarily that it's unfair that Sony denied a pitch for Days Gone 2. I wouldn't be surprised if the pitch wasn't particularly all that. I mean, the genre that Days Gone takes place in is inherently kind of like, so, like, I could see why they wouldn't want another one of these, but the audacity of just putting them on like, hey, this was a bad pitch, go work on Uncharted. That to me is like a real slap in the face, and especially just to allow them to force them to work on it for so long, and then to just be like, oh yeah, you're allowed to drop out, I guess. It's just a massive waste of time when all that time really could have been spent developing this new IP, which is, again, awesome. That's what you want, really, ideally, is new IP. You don't necessarily want sequel after sequel after sequel, and in some ways it's a good thing that there's no Days Gone 2, because they can shine in a different way. And you get more Bend games, and maybe this will allow them to kind of like, identify themselves a little bit more amongst the crowd of, Sony first party. Because I think as it stands, Days Gone just kind of feels like it's another, third person open world action. It'd be interesting to see what they can do that isn't, something that a lot of other Sony studios are doing. It would be cool to see them do a stealth game again, a la like Siphon Filter. The possibility of that is awesome. But it's just so egregious to have wasted their time pumping out like a soulless Uncharted game that they didn't even want to make.
Yeah, they took from, as I understand it from reading the article, seeing some of what Jeff Ross said, and some of my own understanding, is that, they resented having their autonomy taken away. Like, they were like, we made the game, and it did take time. It took too much time. We'll note in a little while. I mean, it took way too long for them to make the game. Yeah. But I think it's a very good game. I think people kind of confuse my own animus about this, about how I'm disappointed that we're not getting Days Gone 2. I don't really care about that. It's just, like I said, when you deny the Days Gone 2 pitch, which probably happened around the time Days Gone came out, then it's like, no, we don't want this. Do something, give us another pitch and whatever. And I think that it's kind of big that they asked to be taken off. Like the leadership of the team went to Sony, like, we don't want to make this. And it seems clear that Naughty Dog was looking at Bend in some way as their satellite, and that they were going to bring them back into the fold. And I think that it's kind of a good sign for Bend in a way that they were comfortable doing that, because that relationship obviously began with Golden Abyss. And I think that that's a great game. And so they worked together intimately on that. Amy Hennig was a big part of that game, helping write that game originally, although John Garvin wrote it. And so it's cool that they're like, well, we want help and we like these guys, but they want to do their own thing. And I feel like they finally liberated themselves. And then, because they did Resistance Retribution, which was great on PSP, and then they did Uncharted on Vita. And then they finally were like, they made a Siphon Filter game. I mean, the game seems to have taken place in the same universe as Siphon Filter, and I was happy for them. And so it's interesting to learn more, and I was really surprised about that. But Dustin, I'm sorry, let's get you back into this now. I'm kind of curious. Here's my take. I feel like there is an obvious mismanagement issue here. I'm wondering if you think we're making too much of it, because Gunnar Zaris wrote into us on Patreon, and remember, you guys can write into us on Patreon as well. He says, hey guys, is it possible we, including myself, are overreacting just a bit in regards to Sony? Of course, things are adding up, but to me, once the dust settles and the games begin to do the talking, with Returnal being front and center, Sony will be a bit more cheery. Games are what matter most, and above all in this industry, after all, everything else is just noise. Sony has Ratchet, Returnal, Deathloop all coming this year, while Microsoft has ... Be good all. Well, they have Halo, which are bigger than all of those games. But, Dustin, what do you think? Are we overreacting?
Here's how I view it, and I said this on Maddie's show, so sorry if people listen to that show are hearing it again, but I think it's a great way to summarize, at least the way I feel about the current situation with this article, is sometimes you leave your house and you walk outside and you go, ooh, it's gonna rain. You can feel it in the air, you can see it in the sky, and it just, there's an ominous feeling. And oftentimes it does rain, okay? But other times it passes over. So the way I feel about Sony right now is the ominous feeling when you walk outside and you're like, ooh, it could rain. It seems like it. So, maybe there is some justification in thinking that we're overreacting, but I don't think that we're saying that it's like 100% Sony is going down this generation and Xbox has won. I think that people, that's not what we're trying to say, but we're going to tell you, how we see it. And right now with these moves, it feels like it's going to rain in Sony's camp. So,
yeah.
And a meteorological reference.
That's right. Yeah.
A metaphor.
Yeah. I would say that specifically this article shines a light on something that might be a bit of a novice kind of interpretation of the industry and how Sony operates. But from the outside looking into the layperson, Sony seems like the place where developers can go and they can make what they want to make. It's the same platform where the people who made Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter could, shift gears into Uncharted and then shift gears into The Last of Us, and Sucker Punch with Ghost of Tsushima, how drastically different those titles are from their previous works. So the thought of, a Sony studio just being stuck with Uncharted when they didn't want to do it, I don't want to say it's like a Wizard of Oz kind of guy behind the curtain type scenario, but it kind of waters down that kind of sense of freedom that a lot of people kind of assume a lot of Sony first party or second party studios have. Or at least that's how I read it when I was reading it. I was like, damn, this is not the place that I would have assumed a studio would just be stuck with something. When Golden Abyss came out, I assumed that that's something that they wanted to do. It wasn't something that I had ever thought that they were just stuck making an Uncharted game for Vita or whatever. And maybe that's just a bit of, again, a novice interpretation of the industry. I'm sure this happens a lot. I'm sure, 343 is stuck on Halo, and on the Xbox side, I think it's fairly reasonable to assume that a lot of these companies probably are. But that was always the distinction to some people between Sony and Microsoft, and the idea that this happens at Sony as well is kind of a little bit, probably just a little bit reality shattering, I think. Well, I don't know.
To add to that, Chris, too, and I was curious what you guys thought about this, is that, so let's lay this out. The Naughty Dog projects that are on the docket right now. We have The Last of Us Remake. From what it sounds like, a Last of Us Part 2 port to PS5, Last of Us multiplayer, and an Uncharted game that Ben was assisting on. And wasn't there some talk about a new IP as well somewhere in there?
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the missing piece, is that they might not even really know. That's what I think Jason has been arguing. I think he was on the MinMax podcast, and I was only reading secondhand, but believe he made the argument that they're kind of working on The Last of Us in part because they have nothing to do for a bunch of them, because they haven't greenlit anything.
I guess I just hope that You know, we saw Naughty Dog in the PS4 generation. They made 2.5 games, and they were both sequel. One was a remaster, and both of the other two were sequels to their previous franchises on PlayStation 3. I would hate to see Naughty Dog spend the entire PS5 generation working on sequels to their greatest hits once again. But so I guess, I mean, with the talk of this new IP, hopefully that is indeed the case.
Yeah, we'll see. It's interesting to note too, Uncharted 4 was really tortured when it got developed. I mean, remember that the game was basically half done, and then they had to reshake it and do it again. So it's a fascinating situation they find themselves in. I still have a lot of respect for Naughty Dog. I don't know that they're really, this doesn't affect the way I feel about them at all, because I don't really think this has anything to do with them. But to the point about, are we overreacting or not? Well, I actually wrote some stuff down earlier. And the audience can just tell me, am I overreacting? Okay. Because I agree with you, Dustin. Because I went back and people are like, wow, Colin, you got really heated on in that clip. And I went and actually watched it. And I'm like, I don't really know that I said anything that's that controversial. So because PlayStation 5 might do really, really well this generation simply based on inertia and nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a totally valid argument to say, like, they're moving so quickly out of the PS4 era with so much momentum that you don't even need to tap it for the PS5 to just continue to move in that direction. And there's going to be positive momentum in that case, no doubt. Also, I agree that, to Gunnar Zaurus's point, games are what are most important, and Sony does have a lot of games. I do dispute that Microsoft has ... indicating nothing. Halo is way bigger than anything Sony has this year, including Horizon, and including God of War, if they both came out this year, which they're not going to. Mm-hmm. So it's, to me, at least God of War won't for sure. So to me, it's a little questionable to pretend that we're just in this stasis period where Microsoft continues to not have any games. It's about to change in a major way with their biggest IP that's bigger than anything that Sony's ever had. So it's worth noting that that's the Microsoft you're going to be dealing with. But I'm not the one saying, or at least not intending to say and put out into there, that Sony has no chance and all of that. I think Sony's fine. I'm a PlayStation fan. Yeah. I'm excited about the games. But here's what I wrote down. Sony doesn't communicate. They don't talk to anybody. And when they do talk, they do really weird things, right? Remember the Mark Cerny Power Hour? What the hell was that? Right? Remember the Wired articles that came out where they started, why are you talking to Wired? I mean, how disconnected are you where you think that talking to Wired is meaningful? No offense. Wired hasn't been a consequential publication in 15 years. Why are you going to Wired? Why wouldn't you go to IGN? Why wouldn't you go to Game Informer? Why wouldn't you go to Wall Street Journal? It does. So number one, not good at communicating. And if you read the blog post, the PlayStation blog is incredibly boring. The PlayStation social media feeds are incredibly sterile. They're not good at communicating. And this leads into my next point. There's no fun, right? Like, if you're not communicating, if you're not having fun with your fans, that matters. Now, that might not matter to most people, but it matters to me and it matters to us on this show. And I think the people that care most about PlayStation or most about video games, mm-hmm. Think about how much fun they have in the Nintendo ecosystem, right? With their different personalities, or when Iwata-san was still alive, and they, who knew might appear on maybe you get Miyamoto, or maybe you get like someone from Bandai, or some person pops up and they have their different characters and they have a lot of affinity for the presentation, for the pomp and circumstance. And I appreciate that Sony wants to go in a different direction with E3 and without press conferences and all of that. And that's cool, but where's the fun? Where's the feeling of fun? These are video games, right? So why did you castrate Shuhei Yoshida? Why did you castrate, your ability to get any CEOs on? You just cut their balls off, right? Gio Corsi used to appear all the time, right? And he doesn't work there anymore. He's at Ilphonic now, but you just cut these guys down to size. And there was no reason for it. And what was weird was that it seemed like they were really starting to get it. Remember that PlayStation experience began in 2014, and it was at that point that it was like, wow, Sony's actually like getting it. If you were at the original PSX, which I was, it was small. Mm-hmm. And you saw it grow and become bigger, and like they were investing in fun, in community, in togetherness.
Yeah, it seemed like they were embracing kind of their momentum on the internet and just their kind of community momentum. And it is a shame that it seems to be like significantly neutered.
People also say like that they don't want to be a reactionary company. Are you sure? Because what was that announcement of Haven all about, if not an incredibly overtly reactionary move? Haven, of course, being Jade Raymond's studio in Quebec. Jade Raymond stopped working at Google in February.
Yeah.
Just to put that into context. And this blog post was written linking to a website that is a text document. It was a text document. And they have no logo. And people are like, well, do they need to let people know they exist? I'm like, Jade Raymond needs to let people know they exist. As I said on the show a while ago, you hire secretly and you let rumors persist and percolate. It's exciting. So don't tell me that Sony's keeping everything close to their vest and not reacting when they put that blog post up. Nonsense. They have no celebration of the past. It was interesting to see Astrobot on PS5, which it is excellent, be such a celebration of PlayStation's history, even with like some of the weird peripherals. Like they had like the GPS peripheral for PSP on there and all that. Like there's stuff that's like people don't even know about.
Yeah.
And it was a sign that, wow, okay, maybe you care. But then with the kind of severing of the PS3 and PS Vita and PSP stores, automatically generated emails and this really sterile PlayStation.com post, not even an acknowledgement on the PlayStation blog, not even an acknowledgement of it on your social media feeds. No celebration of your past. No celebration. You're just going to ignominiously, however you say that word, ignominiously remove these stores and not say anything about it.
Yeah.
You're just not going to do anything about it. PS Vita is just going to go away. PS3 is just they're going to go away. And you're not going to, no celebration of their past. No outreach in this regard either. No, remember, I'm also a developer. I bought a PS Vita dev kit, a second one in in March. And they canceled this. So it's not only an out-facing thing. One hand doesn't know internally what the other hand is doing. And you do not need any more evidence than that. The Major League Baseball situation is a complete embarrassment to Sony. The way that they were treated in that as the least important component of that entire ordeal is a sign of waning influence in some respect. And by the way, someone sent me a picture of a baseball game, like a real baseball game. Mm-hmm. And, behind the batter's box, it said the show, like the MLB The Show, coming to Xbox Game Pass with big Xbox logos. No sign of PlayStation anywhere in this massive advertisement.
Yeah.
What? And then they're dealing with shortages, which they should have been able to anticipate. They're a major mega conglomerate that deals in technology almost exclusively. They should have better access to chipsets, and they should have known that this machine should have been, and I will repeat it, should have been delayed and not released until they could satiate demand. So those are just some of the things I wrote down. Am I overreacting? Those are all facts. You can be the judge on whether I'm overreacting, because, boys, it might be true that they have some... first of all, they have many games that they've not announced yet, of course.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like the ducks are in a row. I'm not confident Horizon's coming out this year. We'll see. God of War is definitely not coming out this year.
Yeah.
That would be shocking. Deathloop being pushed into the fall basically means that they might not need anything else in that area anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised. It would be surprising if Deathloop and Horizon came out back to back, unless they're so fucking annoyed by the Bethesda deal that they just don't care, which is why I think that they're actually slashing the price of Deathloop. It's $53. You can buy it right now, which is pretty amazing. So are we overreacting? I don't know. But I feel like this is a low point. I'm not out here screaming and yelling and hollering. I'm just giving you my opinion. I've been covering PlayStation for a long time. This is a very unusual time, and if they have something to say, they should say it. Don't you think, Chris?
Yeah, no, totally. I think communication is at the heart of every single issue that you brought up. Essentially, they can't communicate with their own studios. They can't communicate internally. They can't communicate with their audience. They can't communicate with their customers and their community. It really is like a huge communication issue, and I think that kind of starts with the top. It starts with decisions that are made, at the head of the pyramid, and it's just it's unfortunate, and none of us are saying like, I don't think there's a single person here who's like, oh, Sony's not going to be here in 10 years. They'll be fine. Like everyone's going to be fine. There's no reality where these companies just go. I mean, aside from like some crazy, like genuinely mythological event, PlayStation's going to be around for a while and they're going to be fine. They're going to be like, very profitable for a very, very long time. It's just a matter of the optics right now and just the excitement and just like online in general. It just feels like people seem more interested in what Xbox is doing, and it's really only because they're doing interesting things, and they do have these personalities, and they do have Phil Spencer going up there and like engaging with his audience in a way that's like, oh, what's on the shelves in the background, what can we find, it's like a little game, which is cool, that's fun because it's speculative, it's like mysterious, it's interesting, and even something as simple as that, as simple as like, hey, here's Indiana Jones in the background of Phil Spencer's video. Hey, here's, a Kojima statue, that leads to conversations, and nothing that Sony is doing is leading to conversations. And the only conversations that are happening are negative ones, but that's not the fault of the people having the conversations. It's the fault of Sony for giving their audience and their communities the material to even have those negative conversations in the first place. And
it's very well said. I totally agree. I mean, Dustin, here's the way I put it, right? Because feeding off on what Chris was saying and feeding off of what I was saying earlier, if you put an object and suspend it in space and then just kick it in one direction, it's just going to continue in that direction forever until it's stopped, right? So again, like coming off of 120 million PS4s, I mean, that's no joke.
No.
But my major concern is that we are dealing with a Sony at the end of the day that feels like it needs to remake The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Right? That it feels, and
it's very weird.
It's pretty clear to me that we are dealing with a Sony that wants to get The Last of Us remade and make it with the HBO series so that they all come out together. And they want the Uncharted movie to have something to do probably with teasing a game that will have to do with something else. It doesn't sound like it would have anything to do with Drake. It's like, dude, I love Uncharted. I don't want any more Uncharted. You left it in a good place. Uncharted 4 is a great way to end it. And if you want to revisit it in 10 years or 10 years from then, so let's say 2026 with his daughter or something, that's really cool. I love that. But leave Nathan Drake alone. And The Last of Us is a masterpiece. It's a complete masterpiece. It doesn't need to be remade. I played it in 2019 for all the way through for Knockback. I loved it. I mean, it was just as good as the first time I played it. It doesn't need anything. And I played it, by the way, on PS3. I didn't even play the PS4 version. So, Dustin, I'm more worried that we're dealing with a Sony that thinks that these things are important. I miss the Sony that made the shared game video. I miss the Sony that made PSP Marcus and that used to trot Jack Trenton out and that allowed Gio Corsi to evangelize the Vita on stage and had fun and used to appear on live streams, and they just had a more gregarious. Just knowing some of the people internally that I know at Sony, especially on the marketing and PR side, you can just tell who got control, and it's not the people that have fun. It's not the people that play games. It's not, so Dustin, how are you feeling? I mean, where do you want to pick it up from here? Is there anything you want to pick up on?
No, I think you're right. And it's like, it's funny. Not everything is in a slogan, but what was the PS4 slogan?
Greatness awaits.
Well, I think that was the launch. They might have changed it. The second one was for the players.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And now that's gone, And you mentioned PSX, and man, there was something special about PSX for real.
Definitely.
And it was the finer details of the event that I thought made it so great, is that it was like a reward almost for the most hardcore Sony fans. The entry to get in was very low. They did custom collectible cards that you could collect. Really cool. They had you would go to each developer to play a game or talk to them, and they would each have a card at the booth, and you can make a full card, like deck of 52 cards. It was very hard to get the full deck. The 3 years I went, I never managed to get the whole deck. But yeah, it was like, there's certain things that a company can do that are beneficial that you cannot put a dollar amount on. Mm-hmm. What is it like when you get a couple thousand fans together and really rally them up? You know, what is the ripple effect of that? You maybe can't put a dollar amount on what the effect of an event like PSX was, but surely it was beneficial long term, at least to me, that sense of community, you know?
Yeah. We're eons away from that, it feels like. I mean, it just feels like a totally different Sony. That, I don't know, I agree with you. Like, the original PSX almost felt half-baked, which was what was so fun about it. And it was just like a total fly by the seat of your pants, we're on top, we're excited kind of moment. And I don't know. So it's not that, I think people just need to understand in focusing our conversation that it's not meant to be negative per se. I feel like we're always honest about this, and I think things are about to get very positive when, at least I hope, when Returnal comes out for our show, and we'll have a lot of positive things to say, but it just doesn't feel great. And Chris, to your point, Adam Mulaney wrote in about who's at the top, and he says, "What's up, boys? I'm curious what your thoughts are specifically on Jim Ryan right now. Since taking over as president and CEO of SIE, he has overseen the launch of PS5, but do you truly think he's the right man for the job? He's received some criticism of late, the PSN store closures, his lack of interest in backwards compatibility, his statements to gamesindustry.biz that Game Pass isn't sustainable despite PlayStation fans wanting their version of the service, and the more recent focus from SIE on converting their game IPs to movies and mobile games. Also, how do you think he stacks up against Phil Spencer? I'm not suggesting a no shirts, no shoes throwdown between the two of them, but who do you think will achieve more success as CEO of their respective company on the other side of this new generation?" I think it depends on how you categorize success personally, Adam, although I think finances are how companies term success or categorize it most importantly. But to me, Chris, I feel like Jim Ryan's clearly not the man for the job. I think Jim Ryan talks out of both sides of his mouth. And I think, as I said on Sacred Symbols Plus and on previous episodes of Sacred Symbols, Jim Ryan clearly doesn't play video games. He clearly doesn't care about them very much. He doesn't know how to talk about them, and he talks out of both sides of his mouth. The Game Pass thing that's one thing, but this is the man that evangelized how we believe in generations, and nothing he said is really panned out in every way. You know, who wants to play this game when he's talking about Gran Turismo A-Spec or something like that? And I don't feel like Jim Ryan is the man for the job because this seems to have started with Jim Ryan. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. The buck has to stop, you know, at some point. And when there's just this overwhelming feeling of something being off, and it just so happens to coincide with the reign of a specific person, then yeah, I mean, like, what can you really say about it other than, yeah, I mean, there's probably somebody better suited. I don't know much about Jim Ryan personally. I only see what Sony does, and it just seems really off. It seemed really off for like a little while now.
It seems like, I mean, to me, he's the man that represents the more business-minded win out behind the scenes that overtook the want for scattered creativity. That people, I mean, I know that a lot of people listening to the show don't even know these names, but when you think about Connie Booth or Scott Rohde or some of these guys that have shepherded Sony for a long time behind the scenes in their products and their production and their IP and making the decisions, this doesn't seem like them, and even though they're still there, it just, when you only have a dozen first party studios, you don't have much to work with. And that's why I was so bummed about Ben having their time wasted. Can't get that time back. You gotta, I don't know that they're going to be able to survive with 2 AAA big games every year the way that they used to be able to survive that way. It's just going to be different. And the Game Pass thing, I don't know. I mean, Sony needs to wrap their mind around what they want to do. And if they don't want a subscription service that can compete truly with Game Pass, then they should say that they don't want to go down that direction and explain why they think it can't work. Because I don't think anyone is questioning Game Pass's non-profitability. The question is, if Sony can withstand those kinds of losses, Microsoft certainly can. So we'll see about that. But I did want to read this question from Isaac Hodgson Downs. I'm sorry, I think I butchered that. He says, "Hi gang. Sony seem to be making business decisions right now, which is fine, but seem to have forgotten what got them to the dance. The fan-focused strategy of the PS4 and PS Vita is still carrying the fan base to this day. Do you believe that the current course, regardless of good or bad business, will resonate with the gaming culture, or will be a failed attempt to become the Disney of the gaming world?" I loved this question because that's the way it feels. Sony feels like they're swinging a big dick thinking that they're Disney, where it's like, well, we don't need to play this game because we have better games. We don't need to play this strategy, this business strategy. We don't need to succumb to subscription models that have dominated commerce because we're Sony. And I don't think that's going to work for them. I think they're going to need to figure this out. Dustin, what do you feel about the dancing with the one that brought you? I mean, we talked about this in different regards. It seems like this is the inertial kind of focus I was talking about, but Sony's got to worry that, think about it. If it's true that they're still riding on the fumes of those days, then they need to have a new engine running now in order to make those fumes run in the future. What do you think?
One of the big questions that I've wondered about this whole scenario is that we saw kind of in the late PS4, the restructuring of Sony. And that's when we saw the castration of Shuhei Yoshida, and we saw
poor Shu.
Yeah, Sean Layden leave. I guess my question partially with that is like, you have a winning strategy that, I mean, to be fair, the number one propellant of the PS4 was the Xbox, which I think we've talked about that on this show.
Mm-hmm.
But that wouldn't be enough. Right. I think that they did a fantastic job. That's like, hey, we have this momentum. What are the moves we make now to secure it long term? And they did that. So like, why is it that when you're ahead in winning, you make a drastic change the other direction? And I get the point of, you don't want to do the same thing for too long. You don't want, the same strategies aren't always going to continue to work over and over again. But this pivot overall just feels so strange to me. I'm trying to think of what the numbers would be that would justify this. Like, the focus is on blockbusters, right? So, and Sony, just like any other company, has a limited dollar amount and time and amount of resources to spend. So, are they looking at it's like, okay, take all of our smaller games that we paid for, right, in the past few years, Concrete Genie, Medieval Remake, Everybody's Golf, whatever. We take the profit of all of those games and the cost, to make them, then would it be better, instead of making those 3 games, is to put all of that budget into one bigger game that is more akin to our really big AAA stuff? That, I guess, could make some sense to me, but only if you're looking exclusively at numbers and only looking at, the big headline success. People are drawn to a console and a platform for that, of course. But clearly to me, there's more to PlayStation 4 that made it great than God of War and The Last of Us 2 and Horizon. Does that kind of jive with you? Like, does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, because I think you're right. And I think you can see it in the interviews that have been given over the years. The PS4 era Sony that was shepherded by Shuhei Yoshida with the studios and Sean Layden from a bigger standpoint is that PlayStation, the one that said, we want to invest in smaller games. You can actually just connect the dots, because Sean Layden gave an interview in which he said that games are becoming too expensive and we need to figure out a way to make games in 2 or 3 years that take 10 or 15 hours to beat, instead of taking 5 years to make a 25-hour game. It's not sustainable. And you can see the decisions that they were trying to make with Medieval, with Concrete Genie, and with others. The thing is that the turnover happened. Shuhei Yoshida was castrated. I'm sorry, Shu. And Herman Holst was brought in from Guerrilla, right? And he oversaw Guerrilla, a wonderful studio. And now he oversees everything. And then you have Jim Ryan, the businessman, right? That takes over at the top. And that happened, and then you can see that the projects, especially not so much Concrete Genie because that is internal, but something like Medieval, that second party, they were like, they clearly couldn't give a shit less about that game. And they do feel, it does feel like they're just going to focus and funnel and say, like, we're going to do Uncharted. And this seems actually, it feels a little bit like Xbox 360. And it was what I didn't like about Xbox 360, which was like, we have Halo and we have Gears, and we have Halo and we have Gears, and we have Halo and we have Gears, you know? And it was like, oh my God, I'm going to blow my head off. I can't. And then every once in a while you'd get like an Alan Wake.
Yeah.
Or a Shadow Complex. But it feels like that. And I'm like, this is boring. And you know what? You can even read into it more, guys, because I kept making fun of Tom Holland and Uncharted, and I'm going to keep making fun of it. That script was greenlit by the same people that are trying to make a symbiotic relationship between movies, TV shows, and their games. Tom Holland didn't get from nowhere from the ether that he should stand there and glisten and sweat and try to get the cool capture of his. You know what I'm talking about? He's the one.
Yeah.
That sandbagged the movie for all of us and let us all know publicly in GQ. All of these things should be taken as interconnected because Sony is finally working as one unit, and it's actually maybe a worse Sony. Ironically, it's a more efficient Sony. It probably will be a more profitable Sony, and so that's all they care about. But I miss the Sony, and I want the Sony, and hope that the Sony will continue. That gives us a little bit of everything. Don't rely on your third-party partnerships, and for God's sakes, stop pretend like audiences or members of our audience have even written to me and been like, you say they have no small games, but what about Stray, and what about The Pathless, and what about Bugsnax? And I'm like, those aren't Sony games. I mean, I don't know what you want me. They're not Sony games. They went out and paid for for timed exclusivity for Bugsnax. Who cares? I mean, it's
a very different.
It's not going to sell like exactly.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's upsetting because it reminds me a lot of the Gears, Halo, Forza Trinity. Was the thing that pretty much defines like, oh hey, okay, Halo, Gears, Forza, and the occasional Fable, I guess.
Fable. It's like,
but
it's not satisfying to me.
Yeah, but even that was like, now it just feels like, yeah, you got Ghost of Tsushima, you got God of War, you got Horizon, all these great games, and we've talked about this before, but these are all third-person, action RPGs. These are all the same kinds of games in a lot of ways, and definitely. I think there's a variety problem, and it happened during the PS4, and it wasn't really that much of a problem because the things that we got out of that were quality, and it was quality over quantity, and that's a good way to go about it. But at a certain point, people are going to start to notice, and it does feel a little bit tiring, and it is a little disappointing that you have Concrete Genie, and you have Astro's Playroom, which is great. But as great as Astro's Playroom is, it's not. I look over at Microsoft and I see like something like Sea of Thieves, which like exploded. Like Sea of Thieves is actually like wildly popular, like way more than I ever thought it could ever be.
Yeah, they stuck with it. They really stuck with it.
Yeah, and I feel like
another good sign.
I feel like Sony doesn't have a thing like that. Something that like
Dreams is what they wanted it to be.
Right,
is that kind of persistent thing that
exactly. And it's I don't know. They gotta diversify their strategy, I think, and that's really it. Just give us.
You're absolutely right.
Different shit.
They have a diversity problem with the games that are coming out too. Now I like those kinds of games, but this is why I'm eager. I'm like, well, let's get a first-person shooter in the mix. Let's get a Japanese role-playing game in the mix. Let's do something a little different. And that's what I'm really hoping for out of Guerrilla, because they still have that in them. But the other interesting thing is that PS5's early identity is being shaped by one studio, and that's Insomniac. And we're going to see how that all plays out. It's kind of interesting. And they've really been given like the whole runway for the early period.
Yeah.
And then they're going to disappear. So it's pretty exciting in that regard for them. But let's end this conversation on a more positive note if we might.
Sure.
If we can, because Michael J. Buffalo wrote into us on Patreon and says, hey, CDC. With Xbox owning the headlines lately, what is one power move or drop the mic announcement Sony can make to turn the narrative? For me, it would be an exclusive remake of Metal Gear Solid from the original PlayStation built for the ground up for PlayStation 5. Keep up the great work. So that would be awesome. And I think it's something like this. I said Chris, I think it was last week I said this on the show. Above all else, at all costs, Sony cannot lose Kojima. That would be even if it's a third party game that's on everyone, you can't lose Kojima because they can't stand another optical piece of damage like that. Like it's just that would be too much.
That would be enormous.
Because he's been on board since the very beginning of PS1. You know, Metal Gear Solid came out in 1998. That game entered development in 96. It's a piece of PlayStation heritage, and to lose him would be just a symbolic blow. Even if, like we've said, Death Stranding wasn't the commercial darling that they clearly wanted it to be.
I remember back when.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I remember back when Bungie split from Microsoft, and they announced that I think the Destiny beta was coming first, or like the Destiny Alpha was coming first to PlayStation. That was like a moment like that where it was like, damn, that is wild. Because Bungie essentially like made the Xbox like worth owning. Like without Bungie, there is no Xbox, I don't think. And to see something like that happen was I think similarly, not to the same degree, obviously, because they're not losing. It's, you know, they're still on both platforms. But it was a moment where it was just like, yeah, if they lose Kojima, it's going to be like symbolically like a huge moment. And
or it's like Rare, Nintendo losing Rare. Like these are moments that you just, I mean, that didn't really cost Nintendo much. I mean, Rare didn't do anything useful after that until Sea of Thieves. So, but I think the positive move is something big. I don't think it's getting Kojima on board or anything like that. I think a move like saying like we acquired Konami's gaming IP, you know, or like imagine if they were like, we own Castlevania. They have to make a move like that, right? Because they just lost some IP that are going to matter, and these IP are not going to matter as much, but they matter to the PlayStation audience. Like we have we have Metal Gear and we have Castlevania and stuff. You got to punch back, and you can tell. I mean, that was why I brought up that Haven blog post again, which is so funny. I mean, I'm always going to bring that up now because it's so clearly them trying to do something, because there was no reason to post that otherwise. So I think it's like some move like that. And then I think that you have to, you know what I would love? If they wanted to get ahead of their skis a little bit, it's a little bit against what I've said in the past, but it is pretty compelling. Like you see those Marvel, like one shots of all of the logos and the dates of everything. And what Sony should do is something similar, not necessarily teasing out dates and games, but having the logos or something. Like it would be cool if like the masthead of their social media feeds was the logos of all of their studios. And then underneath each one, it either had a question mark or like the name of the game they're working on. And like make some sort of game out of it. Make some sort of like, make people dig, make people realize the differences in things. Like make a little bit of excitement.
Right.
You know, and I think that will go a long way. So that's kind of what I think that they need to do, is to just have a big pop or two, acquire a studio if you want, but that's not necessarily, you don't have to buy the cow. I get it, but have a big pop. And I would love the Konami. I mean, the Konami move is what I'm really hoping for, not because I want those games taken away from other audiences, but because I think their only salvation is through PlayStation. I think that they're the ones that understand the best what they need to do with Silent Hill, with Castlevania, with Contra. You know, I mean, it would be awesome. So that's what I would love to see. Dustin, what do you want to see?
I mean, really, I want Bloodborne too. But that would be the mic drop for me and everyone who loves that game. I'm not saying it would be the universal mic drop, but even if it's not Bloodborne 2, some kind of partnership with From Software would be just absolutely awesome. And even just, man, people are out here. We're dying for anything Bloodborne. We want the patch, just a patch for the old PS4 version. We would, you know, be satisfied with. At least I would be. But I don't know. I feel like the Konami IP thing is definitely the most intriguing, especially since there's been some light rumors about that. But I don't know. I think that if Konami was licensing their IP, then they are going to play both sides of the fence on that.
Yeah, I would imagine so too. I don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Unless the money was exorbitant. And that's what I'm saying. Like, Sony's got to pay to play at this point. I mean, that's what I was saying with Kojima. Like, even if you're going to lose Kojima and Microsoft is throwing an insane amount of money, you have got to match it. Like, you have got to appeal to his sense of history. You know, like, there's just certain things, and even being able to reunite Kojima with Metal Gear would be like, see, like, that's the kind of power move where it's like, that's the move. I mean, that might not be possible, but that's the kind of move I'm talking about. Chris, what do you think would be the move?
I think really, I don't think they have to do much. I think all they have to do is just do sensible shit. Like, hey, figure out your back compat situation. Like, I feel like that alone would, like, be a massive amount of good press. You know, just, oh, hey, you know, all these IP, these, like, really relevant, you know, franchises that are stranded on hardware that you are literally neutering very, very soon. Well, guess what? We've got a solution. You can download them on PS5. Not even all of them, just like your first parties and some other, like, maybe if you could draw up some contracts for, like, older stuff. It's, I think, really something simple like that, or even just making PS Now something that people care about, in the sense that, hey, these are games that not only can you stream, you can download them too. You know, like a reasonable platform. I think really something that simple, that gives people a lot of value, that instantly gives your platform a lot of variety, would do a lot to kind of, you know, assuage people's fears, in the sense that, like, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I turn on my PS5 and I'm, aside from, like, the games that I'm literally playing, like, currently, like Oddworld and stuff like that, I don't feel really compelled to turn it on, because there's just not much there right now. But if I knew that I could just go onto PS Now and be like, oh, hey, you know what? I'll dabble into Resistance. It's been so long since I've been able to play it anyway. It's probably worth it. Or like, hey, it's more time spent on the platform, which is ideally what you want on any service. You know, make people feel like, you know, they can go there and find reliably good content, because that's what keeps people coming back. You know, it's not necessarily like, oh, hey, you've got a big game like every November. It's, you know, what are you doing for me today? You know, that's how people think generally, and you just got to appeal to that. And I really think that's all they need to do, but it seems impossible for whatever reason. So
yeah, I think you said it with just sensibility would be nice, and a nice place to start. So we'll monitor this. Of course, we're sorry for our kind of late conversation about it, although it kind of benefited us because more news came out that gave us a little more texture. And of course, that Sacred Symbols Plus episode still exists if you'd like to check it out. Mm-hmm. I'm not the most talented artist and designer. In fact, I can barely draw a stick figure, though I'm especially pleased when a meme I made makes me seem both competent and funny. But that's besides the point. Visual artistic talent has long been my Achilles heel, and this deficiency has reared its head in the past, particularly with my business. That's why I was so pleased that the easy-to-use design platform Canva Pro entered my life, a service that, well, allows you to design like a pro. When you sign up for Canva Pro at canva.me/sacred, that's canva.me/SACRED. You'll gain access to Canva's impressive array of premium photos, videos, audio, and graphics, an astonishing 75+ million individual pieces to choose from, including templates for the artistically devoid like myself. And you can use these tools to design just about anything you want. Presentations, videos, marketing mailers, and even social media posts, and just about everything in between. While it's a useful service for me as an individual, it's especially useful for me as a small business owner, especially when my team's resources are already spread pretty thin. Heck, we at Last Stand Media have in the past subscribed to various services for photos and more that only gave us access to a fraction of what a Canva Pro subscription offers, which wasn't a great experience for us. So Canva's many offerings all being wrapped up into one location is awesome. And it means we don't have to go to X for graphics, Y for photographs, and Z for audio, and so on. It's all there. As someone who's not very technologically sophisticated and maybe a little bit lazy from time to time when it comes to learning new skills, I'm especially keen on Canva Pro's comprehensive web-based interface and just how much simpler it is to interact with than so many of its competitors. Trust me, I've literally gotten lost using some of Canva's competitors. It's like night and day how useful Canva can be for just about anyone looking for some help with design. Individuals, students, bosses, and even those who work for large enterprises. Canva Pro truly brings the art of design to the next level. So give it a try for yourself. If you go to canva.me/sacred, you can sign up for a special extended 45-day free trial of the service. There are no strings attached, so check it out and get designing. Get your 45-day free trial of Canva Pro's suite of design tools by heading to canva.me/sacred. That's canva.me/sacred. Of course, there's other news to get through, quite a bit actually, so let's move. Number 2, as we already knew, Bend Studios' one-time PS4 exclusive Days Gone is migrating to PC. However, we now have a release date. You can find it on Steam and Epic Games Store beginning May 18th. Days Gone on PC adds some interesting tweaks, including 21:9 ultra-wide monitor support, multiple controller support, so you can use like an Xbox controller, customization options for resolution and frame rate, and more. Days Gone, which originally came to PS4 in April of 2019, ended up being Bend Studios' biggest commercial hit ever, though it received a mixed critical response. Bend, purchased by Sony in 2000, was once best known for its Siphon Filter games that spanned the original PS1, PS2, and PSP, and also made well-received portable games, which we brought up earlier, in Resistance and Uncharted franchises. 7 years separated the release of Days Gone and their previous game, the Vita launch title, Uncharted Golden Abyss. So, Chris, I was curious, particularly with you, do you have any interest in checking this out on PC? Because I know you're not a big fan of the game, but when I saw the ultra-wide support, I couldn't help but think of you. And you do have the Epic Games Store login still, right? Where you can get all the games for free.
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason not to try it, I guess, at that point. Yeah, I think I'll give it a shot. It's been long enough that I think just running things at like a reasonable frame rate, it does wonders for my tolerance. So even though it's a game that like I remember having like a lot of problems with, I would imagine that even just something as simple as a rock solid frame rate or solid resolution will do enough to kind of push me through it. I never even got to the meat of that game because it was so just not great when we played it. I'm glad you stuck out with it though, because then we could actually have conversations about it.
Yeah. But I try to see most of the first party stuff through if I can. And like I said, we don't have to relitigate it. I really liked it, but we will not see any more. You won, Chris. You will not see any more Days Gone, it looks like.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want that. That was...
Yeah, way to go.
Yeah. I can will games out of existence as well, I guess.
I know. Well, you have the power goes both ways. The sword is double-edged.
Damn.
Number 3. A big, meaty new PlayStation 5 firmware update has been released. Sony is calling it its April update, and it's, quote, the first major system software update for the PS5 console, end quote. Available to download now, the firmware update does bring with it some cool new additions and more. Perhaps the biggest new feature is the ability to store PS5 games on external USB drives so long as they're compatible with the machine. Since PS5 has less than a terabyte of native storage, this is going to be big for people who like to download and play lots of games at the same time. It's worth noting that games cannot be played from USB. You'll simply be able to transfer games to and fro the machine in a more seamless way without having to delete and re-download everything. The seldom used share play feature is now available across PlayStation consoles as well, meaning that PS4 and PS5 players can remain in parties, stay together as they play, and more. And you can now request to join existing parties across consoles too. The so-called game base, each game's hub on your machine, has also been updated and further personalized. Other smaller features include the ability to disable game chat, download patches for preloaded games, which is huge. That was a weird thing that you weren't able to do. A new trophy stat screen, which is a waste, and more. When I first saw the patch notes, I was like, oh, they fixed trophies, thank God. And then actually you realize that they didn't do anything at all. You can just press square now and see like your trophy list. It's stupid. Oh. Also, when you preload games, for some reason, you couldn't preload a patch. So you would always get the 1.0 version of a game, and then you would have to download the patch after midnight. Now, games that have patches put forward at that time will have the patch ready to go, so that can save you some time. So that's pretty cool. But Dimitri Edwards wrote into us, and I'll throw this one to you, Dustin, first. He says, greetings, gentlemen. Now that expandable storage is an option for the PS5, I have to know, do you plan on purchasing some kind of extended storage? Do you have any recommendations for those of us looking to purchase one? Thanks for everything. So for me personally, even though we're stuck at 825 gigs, I still am of the contention that games will begin getting smaller. Again, it seems like developers think that is the case. I don't think we're going to have blown up 150 gig games anymore in a year or two, although maybe I'm wrong. And so I don't feel the need to have this external drive personally, but it's a cool option. Are you going to utilize it, Dustin?
No. And it's frustrating because Sony should have had the expandable storage figured out by now. I don't know what's happening. In fact, it's getting a little ridiculous at this point. This feels like a stopgap. So if you have an external hard drive laying around or something like that, go for it. It's a good stopgap, but I just can't recommend people to go out and buy an external SSD or something when, and you would think in a few months they're going to actually allow you to buy, the expandable storage drive. So if you are desperate, I'll just point you to the experts over at Digital Foundry they're working on a comparison video about whether you use a hard drive or an SSD or something like that, what kind of speeds you can be looking at. But my overall recommendation is that you should probably wait. But then again, who knows how long you'll be waiting until they unlock that slot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess people are still dealing with data caps and all of that, but I just don't know that it's that big of a deal for most people to just download games and delete them and download them again. I mean, what's the big deal? I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do. Like, if I hit the storage peak, I'll just like, all right, what am I not playing anymore? All right, Spider-Man Miles Morales. Yeah, I finished that game twice, so like I'm probably not going to play it again for a while. There's no reason for me not to download this, or for me not to just delete it and re-download it whenever I fucking want to play it again. There are data caps in some places, so that is a reasonable concern for those people. But yeah, I'm with Dustin in the sense that like it's weird that there's a piece that there's a slot on the machine that has to be patched in that's already physically there. That's like very bizarre to me. I don't understand how that works, but just seems again just really disorganized. I think Microsoft has had this figured out they had it figured out from launch, right? Like the expandable storage or whatever the hell.
Well,
because I'm pretty sure you could buy expandable storage for the Series X. I'm not sure, but
yeah, you can get those they look like little memory cards.
Yeah.
For the Series X, and they also have the same feature where you can offload things onto hard drives.
Yeah.
My big theory, which maybe if someone I'm not quite up to date on all of my SSD news, but my theory is twofold. Either one, they're having issues with getting third-party SSDs to properly run on the PS5, which would be a big problem. My other theory is they are waiting for the price to go down till they're at least equivalent to the Series X expandable storage, because if I recall correctly, it's a very specific speed stat required for the PS5 that is definitely most likely more expensive at the moment. So they don't want. I'm guessing that Sony would be a little gun shy to have expensive storage options because they've been shit on before regarding that. So
yeah, and it would be difficult, even though it would be third-party expandable storage. It's still the saddling of the price with the Vita memory cards will loom large. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
All right, number 4. It was just a couple of weeks ago that we learned the sad news that the PlayStation Store would be going down forever on PlayStation 3, PSP, and Vita. Oop, I'm going to make myself a little brighter here. There we go. Beginning this summer. However, it appears that we've already begun losing some content in the form of patches. A detailed thread on Colin-approved website PSN Profiles, which I use every day, is tracking which patches are available and unavailable on PlayStation 3 in particular, since it appears many patches are disappearing, leaving players with 1.0 versions of games both on disc and digitally. Patches are appearing, then disappearing, then reappearing, and sometimes going away for good. And as of the time we're recording this, huge PS3 games like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Payday 2, Resident Evil Revelations, and more are missing their patches, indicating that it's crossing over between publishers. Even first and second party games like Flow, Journey, Little Big Planet 2, Uncharted 3, and more are missing their patches. It remains to be seen if anything is to be made of this, since Sony never talks about anything, and things just instead randomly happen. On the topic, it's also still worth noting that publishers Ubisoft has plans to take down online functionality for some of its still operating PS3 games, including Ghost Recon, Future Soldier, Rainbow Six Vegas, and Rainbow Six Vegas 2. Those specific teardown dates have yet to be revealed. So there's that. Disappearing patches. So it sounds like things are already starting to be disconnected behind the scenes in very Sony-like fashion. And number 5, Sony is ratcheting up its partnership with Epic to such a degree that it has decided to dump another $200 million into the company in return for shares of the corporation that's now wholly valued at a staggering $28.7 billion. Word comes by way of Epic itself, which included some lame suit quotes and not much else. You'll recall that last year, Sony threw $250 million into Epic for a small piece of the company, so it now has effectively doubled its holdings in the maker of Unreal Engine and the holder of the very popular Fortnite IP. So speaking of Epic, Fortnite and Sony's new investment, it should come as a little surprise that Sony will now begin crossing over into Fortnite. And such a move has begun in earnest, as Aloy, the protagonist from Guerrilla Games' Horizon series, is now in the free-to-play shooter. Horizon itself came to PS4 in 2017, and we are awaiting its cross-gen sequel Forbidden West, which is apparently launching on both PS4 and PS5 later this year. Chris, any interest in talking about this further?
Well, I mean, it is technically the second Sony character to be in Fortnite, so that's kind of interesting because they got Kratos. True. They got Kratos in there.
Indeed.
Very weird. I don't play Fortnite enough to really have any insight on this, but it's interesting that they're ramping up their support of Epic.
Yeah, Dustin, what do you think about this another $200 million? Because what's interesting is that the cumulative input is $450 million, which it gives Sony something like 1% of Epic. I don't know what the point even is of this. I don't have, unless like they're going to, the only thing I can think of is that maybe they're going to have some sort of deal with Unreal Engine and not have to pay those licensing fees and all that stuff. So maybe it does work out in some way, but I don't really understand why Sony's so keen on dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into a company with a market cap of like 50 billion. You know, it doesn't really make any sense.
I would think that this has to do with Unreal Engine for sure, though it is a little odd in the fact that Sony does have a few of their own proprietary engines, but so maybe that's not the angle. But the other thing, you got to wonder if maybe they see Epic as a future. I mean, they are currently a leader in the PC, market space. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's with Sony's new initiative towards releasing some of their old games on PC. They see Epic as the valued partner in that. But again, I don't really know what the end goal is with it's funny to say a small investment of almost $500 million, but when we're talking about companies this big, that's definitely small.
Yeah, it's small. And by the way, I mean, you want to talk about utilizing resources and the ability to get, generate excitement. $500 million, $450 million can buy you a couple studios easily, a couple of big studios. Insomniac, you could buy Insomniac 3 times for that. So yeah. It's not the most exciting use of money, but maybe it gives them returns and access to markets. It's just more of the big games, big blockbuster, big connections, big companies. And you're right. They do have Sony's ICE team initiative for the common engine, which never gets talked about. And they do create their engines internally. But yeah, having access like Days Gone did to Unreal Engine with Unreal 5 kind of looming is interesting. So maybe that has something to do with it. Number 6. It looks as if PlayStation is gearing up to re-engage in the mobile space, a space it has fought some half-hearted battles in the past with mostly neutral consequences. How do we know this? Well, PlayStation appears to be hiring for a so-called head of mobile that would work out of either the Bay Area or LA in California, according to a job posting from the website greenhouse.io. Here's part of the lengthy job description, quote, "As head of mobile, you will own and develop the mobile game strategy for PlayStation Studios and help build a foundation for future growth opportunities. You will lead all aspects of the expansion of our game development from consoles and PCs to mobile and live services, with a focus on successfully adapting PlayStation's most popular franchises for mobile. You will be responsible for building and scaling a team of mobile leaders and will serve as the head of this new business unit within PlayStation Studios," end quote. You'll recall that the original PlayStation Mobile initiative was launched in 2012, ran on Android, and allowed games to be brought not only to phones, but to PlayStation Vita as well. In 2015, that initiative went away. You'll recall that Sony's other attempts at mobile gaming, like 2015's Run Sackboy Run and 2016's Uncharted Fortune Hunter, went nowhere. And this appears to be an attempt to reinvigorate Sony and put its IP onto the biggest gaming platforms in the world, your phone. So I don't hate this. It's not for me, but Chris, this could be a nice way for them to expand. It kind of does go into the Disney type soaking ubiquitous territory that they seem to be meandering into. And of course, they've tried this in the past with PlayStation Minis. There was PlayStation Mobile. There was even an Xperia phone and all of that, a PlayStation branded phone with a D-pad and the sacred symbols on it and all of that. So I don't hate this, but what do you think about them hiring in the first party a person that will work within that SIE ecosystem alongside the people that actually make the big games in order to kind of downgrade them, I guess.
Yeah, it's not exciting to me only because the quality bar on mobile is so low that even if they did manage to make something impressive on a phone, I still feel I still feel like I wouldn't be compelled to really try it at all. There's something about, and maybe this is a bit dumb, but I just don't see the phone as like a place where I want to play games at all. So this has no value to me at all. And the fact that they tried this before and they're trying it again, I don't want to read too much into it, but it seems again like something. It just seems disorganized. Like, I don't know why you would want this. Like, what PlayStation series even can you casually play like a mobile Last of Us? Like, people aren't going to like sit on the toilet and play The Last of Us on their phone.
Dude, the opening scene from Last of Us 1.
Yeah, it's like, oh yay. Like, my daughter is dead. Like, that's not like a mobile. That's just not a mobile game. I don't know. Like, even Mario games. Like, wasn't there like a Mario Run game or something? Yeah, even those.
That was fun.
Yeah, but even those are like watered down and just very like rudimentary, even compared to something as simple as Mario. So I just don't even understand like what they could possibly adapt from their first party, because all of it is so dire and grim, and the few that aren't are already like, you take Ratchet or something, right? Or like Sackboy or something like that. You're gonna want to just play Ratchet. So like, I don't know. How big is mobile gaming now? Because I know it was huge a while ago.
Oh, it's massive. But the problem is that it grows every year. But the problem with mobile gaming, and why I think this is kind of a fool's errand, is that, and you can read about this, I read about it a lot, is as mobile gaming, as the market for mobile gaming sucks more money in, it's doing so from a static number of players in a few games. And so this has always been the case. So it's just a very hard market to broach, even though there's a lot of money to be made there. It's being made by Activision with Call of Duty. It's being made by King. It's being made, which is also owned by Activision. It's being made by Pokemon Go and Niantic and Nintendo. And I think Sony sees this and they're like, we should get in on this, but I think it's a little half-hearted. And Dustin, to Chris's point, I think this might be a little different, because I actually disagree with something Chris said, which is that this actually seems more organized than their previous attempts, because at least they're trying to create some sort of umbrella under which this would happen, as opposed to being like, oh, Run Sackboy Run came out and
that's
no one cares, So, Dustin, how are you feeling about seeing some of this stuff on phone? Because I don't think it's them saying, well, I mean, God, look at what happened with Clap Hands. We were just talking about Everybody's Golf.
So I was going to say,
they just released it on mobile. I mean, that literally could have been a Sony game, and everyone loves it. So it's like, I think maybe that has something to do with it too.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like, what perfect Sony IP would work great on the phone? Oh wait, they went and released the game without them, which is fine. But something that I've come to terms with in the recent few months is that I just don't think are the market for mobile games. Yeah. And it is, the market is so weird right now. Colin, you're right, that so many of these games are sucking up all of the money, and it's really hard, even if you have a great game, to convince someone to pay for it because of the race to the bottom. Apple has started to shake this up with the Apple Arcade subscription service, where you spend $5 and you get access to all these games that have no microtransactions and are complete, which is cool. I really like what they're doing, but it's a situation where it's like you're either on Apple Arcade and doing that, getting your funding from Apple, or you're part of the race to the bottom in the normal App Store. So how Sony navigates that, in whether they have a gotcha Last of Us game or whatever, whether it's like, Last of Us Shadow Legends or whatever you want to call it, like some kind of weird thing like that, where, you're spending $1 to $5 in order to get a pack, and hopefully you get the Ellie card or whatever, or, the problem is, to me, the angle is like people would rather spend Well, no, people would not rather spend. People like me would rather spend $10 on a full, really good mobile game. But that just simply is not what the market wants with the race to the bottom. So it's weird. I would be cautious about getting into that just because it's a weird market.
Yeah, it's definitely always been volatile since the very beginning and had massive consequences for everyone else in the gaming industry. But a lot of conventional wisdom about mobile gaming has always been wrong. And so it's not necessarily a great place for even mega conglomerates to be. And I think Sony is better off. See, this is kind of splitting the difference because it's like we're all about hardcore AAA $200 million games and then also Sackboy Run. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Number 7. Some weeks ago, we discussed right here on the show Square Enix's newly revealed DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake called Intergrade. Thanks to a new press release from the publisher/developer, however, we now have a better idea of what's going on with this expansion. For starters, Intergrade is simply the total PS5 package of Final Fantasy VII Remake that will include the DLC. The DLC's name itself, which stars character Yuffie, will be called FF7R Episode Intermission. What will you be doing in this DLC? Quote, players can look forward to utilizing Yuffie's signature battle style and combat while they infiltrate the shadowy Shinra Corporation to steal a powerful materia and restore glory to her homeland as she shines in both close and long-range combat. As a member of Wutai's elite corps of ninja operatives, her unique ability allows her to throw her iconic massive throwing star at enemies. During that time, she is able to attack with long-range ninjutsu that can be augmented with her elemental ninjutsu ability, which can change its affinity to fire, ice, lightning, or wind, end quote. So clearly, Yuffie is going to play markedly different from the game's existing 4 playable characters, Cloud, Barret, Tifa, and Aerith. Remember, you will have to buy the DLC even if you take advantage of the free core game upgrade from PS4 to PS5, though you can order the whole Intergrade package for PS5, which includes the DLC for $69.99. The DLC itself will cost $19.99 and will be available beginning June 10th. I gotta say, Dustin, I'm pretty excited about this. I think I'm actually going to play this bad boy when it comes out, which I rarely do with DLC, because I really like Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I also feel like I'm going to lose my mojo with the game if I step away from it for too long.
Right.
My problem is that I think I want to play the PS4 version, and therefore I'm going to have to just buy the DLC on PS4, because I don't want to have 2 trophy lists. That's going to annoy me. Yeah.
Well, I can't help you there. You do you on that.
Yeah, I will. I will do me.
I'm excited. I like the fact that it seems like, we don't know how long it is, but $20 sounds fair. I'm just very bitter about the fact that the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC, say what you will about Kingdom Hearts, but was a retread of the ending and then a boss gauntlet for $30. And I could not believe how ripped off I felt after that. Like, that's half the price of the fucking game that you just sold me, and it's just a rehash.
That's what you get, Kingdom Hearts.
That's probably true. We probably get what we deserve, and that's
should have got Balan Wonderworld instead.
I know,
dude. Yeah. So, I'm glad. I hope that it's good. It looks fun, for sure. It's more than I would have expected them to do, for sure.
Are you going to play it, Chris?
Probably. Now that I probably won't do the PS4 version though. I think it's been so long since I played Final Fantasy VII Remake that I might as well just jump into it with like a proper upgrade. I'm having a real hard time going back to older games that aren't 60. Like, I don't know, it's painful for me. Like, to a degree that I didn't expect now that I'm so used to the little bells and whistles. But yeah, no,
well,
I'll probably
Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission is for you then on PS5.
Yeah.
Bump that frame rate for you.
Yeah.
All right, number 8. Here's a bit of a random surprise. Sonic Colors looks like it's coming to PlayStation 4. Word comes by way of website Gamatsu, which reports on 2 separate essential, though indirect confirmations that the game is coming. For starters, it's been revealed that voice work for the game was done at a German VO studio in December of last year. That was kind of circulating on Twitter. And then, perhaps most importantly, a French retailer has listed a so-called Sonic Colors Ultimate for PS4, which has a lower price point and a nebulous 2021 release date. So it's clearly real and on the verge of being officially announced. Now, this is interesting for us here in the PlayStation ecosystem because Sonic Colors was never released on non-Nintendo platforms. when it launched in late 2010. One version came to the Wii and another to DS, but as a fast-paced platformer, it's safe to assume it'll find a welcoming home on PS4. The hell was going on over there, Dustin?
I'm sorry.
I was reading that.
I had to plug something in recently, and I realized my camera was unplugged, and it was saying the battery was like, we're done. So hopefully, I don't know if it caught me bumping my head against the microphone.
I don't know. We'll find out. But
I'm back.
Just wanted to throw that out there. I have nothing more to say about Sonic Colors, but I thought it was weird. Like, they did new VO for it, and they're porting it. I assume it'll be the Wii version of the game. Nothing more to say about it. I just wanted to throw it out there. Sega is making. I mean, we money. I mean, Sega's re-releasing everything. That they said that in their financials last year that they're just making.
I have a question for you guys.
Money. Yeah.
Should Sonic just be put down?
Yes.
Like taken out back and put to sleep permanently?
No, Sonic's got so much life left in him.
Unfortunately, that's
feels
true.
Like he's
the
hanging
movie
on.
did really well.
Actually.
You're right.
Oh my god, can you imagine like we're gonna get a movie based Sonic game?
With Jim Carrey in it. Yeah, the movie revitalized it a little bit. Sonic games have been getting better apparently, and Sonic Colors is one of those stranded games. Hey, props to Sega for realizing that they have a game that's stranded on Wii of all consoles. It's like that game's done. I mean, no one's ever going to play that game again. So yeah, that's nice. But yeah, I think Sonic should be put down in really the most violent and grotesque way you can possibly think, as soon as possible.
ASAP. Not
Number
for the
9.
money, for the culture.
Oh, sorry.
It would be the right thing to do culturally.
Yeah. Don't interrupt me again, Dustin. Number 9. Many of you out there are eagerly awaiting the long-coming Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and so there's good news. The game has gone gold, meaning the core development is finished and the game has been submitted for publishing and pressing. The compilation, due to come to PlayStation 4 on May 14th, is the first time PlayStation gamers have had native access to the original Mass Effect trilogy since PlayStation 3. As you recall, Mass Effect was late in coming to PlayStation, so we didn't get the first game on PS3 until after the second game came to PS3, but by 2012, Mass Effect 3 launched on all platforms simultaneously, and other than the ill-fated Mass Effect Andromeda, we haven't seen anything from this series until now. All 3 original Mass Effect games are included in the Legendary Edition, including virtually all of its DLC. Chris, will you play it?
Yeah, I really love Mass Effect, and it's over on the Xbox ecosystem. You can just play those natively in back compat, and I think it's like up-res, which is nice. But
Wouldn't that be nice to do it here?
Huh? Yeah, it'll be nice to do it here
on PlayStation 3.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do it on like a modern platform with like all the bells and whistles and on a PlayStation. Jesus, but you know, I don't know if you guys saw these kind of like screenshots and these like this like trailer video that they showed when they announced this, but it looks kind of worse in some places. Like the textures are definitely better, and like, you know, the lighting's technically better, but everything looks like washed out and like weird. And we're getting to a point now where like, yeah, it does technically look more realistic, but it also looks artistically less interesting. So I don't know. It's a very weird place to be, where I'm looking forward to playing this, but I wonder how much I'm going to notice how much less lively it looks. But
yeah, I mean, with I just played the original Mass Effect on PS3 not even a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
It holds up fine, but yeah, we'll see. It is interesting you bring this up, because Mass Effect did have a little bit of a stylized feel to it, even though it's ostensibly realistic. Dustin, are you going to give this Mass Effect trilogy a go?
I'm going to try to be realistic about it and make sure that I start it in a time frame where I can actually play it. I'm very interested, though, because I have not gone back to these games at all since the original release. But yeah, I have to agree with you, Chris, that some of the screenshots and those comparisons, I'm like, feels different. I don't know. I couldn't tell whether I thought it looked worse or just it was like shockingly slightly different.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes it's not quite as far, which I'm curious what you think. Like the when they went and did that Halo 1 where they redid the graphics.
Yeah, it looked terrible.
I can't stand it. I hate it.
Looks like garbage.
Right. It's like you got to be careful when you start to mess with the artistic level of the presentation of the game.
Yeah, it's art style is important to me. I know, and like I don't know. Maybe it's not that I thought that they looked worse, but like the way that the trailer showcased them was very odd because they did the traditional like screen wipe, and typically that's like before and after, but this one was like after before. So like you got the sense that they were showing you the evolution, but it wasn't, and it just made it seem like chronologically like, oh wait, is that better? Like, what am I looking at? It was just a very odd way to do it. I wouldn't have.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't have sequenced it that way because it's the messaging was a bit awkward, but it doesn't look it doesn't look so much worse that it's like unplayable. It's just something that I noticed, and I'm looking forward to going back. Mass Effect 2 is a game that I really, really love. And I played it recently, and it holds up. And if they've made like minor improvements to these games, I can only imagine it's probably going to be even better. So, looking forward to it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I for one, am just gonna. I'll probably buy it because I want to support EA in this endeavor. There's still love in my heart for Mass Effect, a lot of love, but I think I will just buy it and not play it anytime soon.
Yeah.
Number 10. We've been very hard on Sony as of late, and reasonably so. So let's give them some credit where credit is due. They're working hard on going green, especially with PlayStation 5's packaging. The company quietly posted a story on its official blog that shows off their initiative, and it's a worthy one that deserves praise. The piece reads in part, quote, over the last 50 years, plastic use worldwide has increased around 20-fold, but recycling rates remain low at 9%, end quote. As such, PS5's packaging attempts to remedy this in its own small way, quote, the materials used for the PS5 console and accessories packaging are designed to be fully recyclable, and depending on the product's PS5 packaging per unit is between 93 and 99% plastic-free overall, end quote. And there's more. Quote, additionally, in 2021, we will be testing the inclusion of polypropylene recycled from post-industrial waste in our physical game cases in Europe, end quote. So it's pretty cool. They silently talked about this on their corporate blog. Only I read the corporate blog, so I don't think anyone even saw it, but...
Yeah.
But I thought that this was a nice little initiative, right, Chris? Go green.
Yeah.
Good for the environment. Be cognizant.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's shocking that the company remaking The Last of Us for the third time is into recycling. But yeah, it's very good.
Very, very well done. Set you up.
Yeah.
With that one, a little meatball over the plate for you. Number 11. A couple of job postings for a handful of studios we're eager to see more from have been posted, perhaps indicating what those teams may be working on next. Let's start with the first party first. Sucker Punch, the Sony-owned studio behind Sly Cooper, Infamous, and most recently Ghost of Tsushima, is hiring a multiplayer and network programmer who will, quote, be pivotal in bringing that creativity to life in a spectacular multiplayer game, end quote. While Infamous 2 had online connectivity in the form of user-generated content all the way back in 2011, it wasn't until 2020's free Legends expansion for Ghost of Tsushima that Sucker Punch fully flexed its multiplayer muscles for the first time, and it appears they are intent on continuing to do just that. Outside of the first party, however, we come to 2K-owned team Cloud Chamber, the studio working on the next Bioshock. According to website PC Games N, Cloud Chamber is still seeking heads for the project, and it sounds like the next Bioshock will be open world. The team is looking for someone, quote, who can weave impactful character-driven stories in an open-world setting, end quote, while they're also looking for a writer who will be, quote, brainstorming primary and secondary content, end quote. While Bioshock had been known to be semi-open and at least gives you the feeling of non-linearity, the series has always revolved around tightly controlled narratives in a more contained space, so the new Bioshock is certainly going to be different. The original Bioshock launched in 2007 and came to PS3 in 2008. It was followed by a sequel, Bioshock 2 in 2010, and Bioshock Infinite in 2013, also both on PS3. Matthew Urso wrote into us on Patreon and it says, hey, Rocky Balboa, Latin God, and Long Dong Dustin. Wow. Is 2K and Cloud Chamber stuck between a rock and a hard place with the next Bioshock? A recent article making the rounds talked about Cloud Chamber recruiting for several positions that all seem to hint that the next Bioshock will, in some form or another, be open world. While this could be interesting, I must admit I have some trepidations, and this is why I ask if 2K and Cloud Chamber are stuck with this game. It seems like if the next Bioshock is just a copy of the ones before, they'll get criticized for not doing anything new. And if they do something new like an open world, they'll get criticized for abandoning the series' roots. What do you guys think? Is it possible for Cloud Chamber to pull this off? And what would you guys like to see from the next Bioshock? Thanks, and keep defiling that chicken booty. I think I'll do just that. Thank you. Now, Chris, before we even get into Bioshock, I really want to talk to you guys about this. Ghost of Tsushima, do you think Sucker Punch is hiring for the sequel that will, I guess, inherently have Legends built into it, or are they hiring for some interstitial game, or does this have just to do with the original Ghost of Tsushima? What do you think? We don't know.
Yeah, I would imagine it's something to do with the sequel. I would imagine they would want to have some multiplayer suite built into Ghost of Tsushima 2 or whatever the hell they call it. Because Legends is so good, and while Legends is really good, it's also very small in scope. It's not like I wouldn't say it's like a particularly robust multiplayer suite, but it is a very strong foundation for something that could exist in the future. But I don't think that they would bother, updating Legends in the first game to any like degree that it would be like a full-on multiplayer suite. But I think they have something really special with Legends, and it would be a shame if they abandoned it for the sequel. I think it is really cool, and I think it's one of the few examples, especially now, of Sony first party being like really strong in both single player and multiplayer spaces. I think we haven't seen something quite like that since, I think, probably like Uncharted. I think Uncharted 2 was like the last time that like a first party like multiplayer and single player like really gelled and kind of exploded and was like super, super well received. So them carrying that torch forward seems to make the most sense. I don't imagine them making like an interstitial, like just some random kind of offshoot IP or something. Like that would be bizarre, but
yeah,
I suppose anything's possible in this weird ecosystem.
I feel like it makes a lot of sense for this to be for the sequel. I agree with you. I think it is for the sequel. And since they gave Legends away for free, there's no reason to not just bake it into the second game off the bat. I mean, what is the point of not doing that? So, especially because people really like it. I think there's two things. I think Sony and Sucker Punch are maybe surprised by how many people like it, and I think they might be a little sad they didn't sell it. Because I think they probably could have, and I think they maybe should have. Like, that's the other thing is Sony has this percolating ecosystem of, we give you New Game Plus, we give you the frame rate boost, we give you a little bit of, little single player DLC that's free and some trophies. But there's something, and I know this sounds weird, but there's something to be said about like having the confidence to say like, we are going to give you a $20 expansion worth $20. And I would rather see, I like revisiting games. Like I was bummed that we didn't get like God of War DLC or Days Gone DLC or, something more like Infamous First Light, which I thought was pretty neat.
Well, the only thing I would say is that like I think it's wise that they gave it away for free, only because while it is a strong multiplayer suite, again, it isn't as, I don't think it's big enough to sell. It's good enough to sell, but I think people ultimately would have felt like $20, like this is good, but like I don't know. And I think it's also like good press for them, especially at that time when Xbox is over here giving away so much for free in comparison, that it's like it was probably like really, really wise and beneficial for Legends reception and player base overall, that it was something that was sort of given away for free. That was the best press that Sony had in a while, especially because that was coming off the tails of The Last of Us 2 kind of having like this really awful media circus, even if it was selling well and critically acclaimed. I think they needed something like that to be free.
That's a good point. Now, Dustin, let's revisit Matthew Urso's inquiry here about Bioshock. I personally am incredibly disappointed to hear this, because Bioshock's not an open world game. I don't know what the hell this is, but it's like, why don't you just let them make a game of their own then? It's not, because I agree with Matthew. They are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Wouldn't you agree, Dustin? Because they're never going to be able to replicate Ken Levine. It's not going to happen. So they need to make their own game. But then the questions are going to become like, well, what makes this Bioshock? And I'm more concerned now than I was, let's say, last week about this project. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I know not everyone feels this way. That's fine. You don't have to agree with me. But Bioshock is Ken Levine's writing. That's what makes the game so special. And while I don't think Bioshock 2 is a bad game, it's not to the quality of Bioshock 1 and Bioshock Infinite. That magic, the Ken Levine magic, wasn't there for me. So whether it's open world or not, I can't help but feel like this is like a cover band version trying to make an original, like I don't know, some like a Lynyrd Skynyrd cover band making their own original in the style of Lynyrd Skynyrd or something, and you're like, this ain't it, you know?
Well, it kind of reminds me of I was listening to Rogan yesterday, and he had Brian Greene on, the physicist, and they were listening to like a computer study like Amy Winehouse. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And Nirvana and stuff, and then wrote songs, and they sound. The Nirvana song sucks, but like the Amy Winehouse song is nuts. You know, it's almost like, why don't you just tell a computer what BioShock is, and it will probably come up with something better than this.
Right. So I think, like you said, the fact that it's open world, at what point does the BioShock name just become branding and brand awareness? To be clear, though, I mean, I'm holding all judgment until we actually see the game. I want it to be great. I want it to be like, whoa, BioShock can live without Ken Levine. I don't have confidence that that's the case.
Yeah, or Chris, I got to get you in here. I mean, you love BioShock like I do as well, and I just feel like it's cool that 2K has Ghost Story Games, which is Ken Levine's new studio. That game will be a 2K game, so they already kind of have him involved. But it just does beg the question, like, why didn't you just let him or convince him and give him what he wanted to just make BioShock again? You know, everyone has a price, you know, and it's like, I don't want some pale replicant of the game we love so much. BioShock is arguably one of my 5 top favorite games ever, you know. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, ideally you wouldn't want, like, it strikes me as like a Weird Al parody that isn't funny, you know, where it's like, you're not. I agree with Dustin. I think BioShock is Ken Levine, and I think even when I was young and I had no idea who these people were, or didn't really care that much about like who was behind what, I remember playing BioShock 2 and feeling like something wasn't right, or feeling like something was off, and it wasn't until way later that it's like, oh, okay, that makes a ton of sense, because these people, like, it's like a Kojima thing where it's like these people kind of make these things work. BioShock and BioShock Infinite are massively different games, but they both have like this very, very interesting way about them. They have such a specific style of writing and such a specific style of design, even with their rapid differences in tone and even in, I would argue, genre, that I don't know if some random studio off the street, even if they're under the same umbrella as, you know, Ken Levine under 2K, I don't know if they can really do another BioShock. I don't think another BioShock can really work. And I always kind of felt this way, and I was waiting for more news to come out about it. But now that it's like an open world, apparently, like if it's an open world, like I'm extra sure that this is just not going to work. And it brings me no joy to say that, because I would love nothing more than another BioShock. But I would want a BioShock that Ken Levine wants to make, and I would want a BioShock that isn't another open world. Like, the whole point of BioShock was that it felt so open despite its linearity. It felt like a real place. It felt like a well-realized reality. The
non-linearity was a mirage. I mean, that's what was so cool about it.
Exactly. You know? It was like a very directed experience. And I think that's, you know, that doesn't work for everything, but it works pretty perfectly for BioShock. It reminds me of, and this is like a little bit different because like Batman is obviously like a, you know, a way different character, but like it reminds me of the shift from Asylum to City, where like Arkham Asylum was very, very linear, but it was awesome, you know, because it was directed, and it was like all these levels were like designed. And City, while I felt like it was like, you know, better as a Batman game, I felt like it wasn't as good of a video game because it felt less designed, it felt less directed, and it felt less paced. And I worry about this because BioShock is all about the pacing, and BioShock is all about, you know, revisiting atmosphere. And I don't know, like maybe they can build like a really amazing atmosphere and stuff like every square inch of an open world with stuff that's as interesting as the cellar in Colombia where you can play the guitar, or the baby in the or the gun in the crib. But
that's exactly what I was going to say. The gun in the crib moment. Like, you can't even have that kind of moment in an open world.
Yeah.
You can't.
Or,
you know, like
or even similar smaller things like the shotgun with the spotlight over it, and I'm sure you could get that done, but I'm really, really skeptical of that, especially because we've not seen anything about this, not even concept art, not even just a general idea as to what this game's going to be. I feel really doom and gloom about this, the next Bioshock, and I didn't want to feel that way, and I've been kind of keeping myself from saying anything about it publicly until we knew more about it, but this is like not what I want out of Bioshock.
Yeah, it's a new team as well, so...
Yeah.
Now, experienced teams, 2K, to their credit, is investing in newer teams, which is cool.
Yeah.
And, like, keeping them around and allowing them to live, which is neat. But, so, you know, you had Hangar 13 taking over Mafia, for instance, as an example of that. But I agree with you. Like, you have there's options, right? You can have a Red Dead Redemption 2 style story, like you said, where the moments are in the open world, and that requires incredible scripting and lots of effort and understanding that players are simply not going to encounter a lot of the stuff that you put into the world. Or you can have like a really tight narrative driven game that's about moment to moment gameplay, set pieces, and locations, which is what Bioshock was about. My only hope is, and we can move on about this because we really have nothing else to speculate about, but my only hope again is that Ken Levine is somehow not helping, not any of that, I'm sure he's not, but somehow has his finger on the pulse and at least is being consulted about what they should do. You know, if that's not happening, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Number 12, as we already reported, popular Square Enix Nintendo DS action RPG The World Ends With You is receiving a sequel, Neo The World Ends With You, and now it has a release date. Players can expect to play the upcoming action RPG on PS4 on July 27th. The original game was also an action RPG and came to Nintendo DS in July of 2007. Like the original, the new game takes place in the Shibuya section of Tokyo, and though it's unclear if the original game is also coming to PlayStation 4, it's certainly a possibility, as it was ported to Nintendo Switch back in 2018. That was the biggest thing I was wondering about here, is if we will get the original, which doesn't exist. Dustin, does this weeb stuff speak to you?
Yeah, this is a bit of a blind spot for me, which is interesting because it is a Nomura joint, as far as I know.
It is.
I am interested, and I know that they're doing an anime of the first game that will connect directly into the sequel. So I may lightly peruse into this anime, and if it if it tickles my fancy, shall we say, maybe I will take a dive into the sequel.
Yeah, I want to play this. I remember when it came to Nintendo DS, it was around the time that I started working at IGN. And I never got a chance to play it. And I really hope that when I was reading about it in preparation for the show, and I was like, oh, it came to Switch. Like, so there is a single screen port of this game. So, which is half the battle, right? Nintendo DS games don't migrate very often because it's annoying. I mean, that was what happened with Phoenix Wright when we finally got those games on PlayStation and stuff. I hope there are a few other series on DS, because I love Nintendo DS, but I would love to see games like Professor Layton eventually come over from Level 5 and others, and this was another one of those games where I'm like, and the Final Fantasy Tactics Advance games are another, the second one specifically, which is a DS game. So half the battle is done getting it on Switch, so bring it to us, and I assume that is going to happen. I have to assume that they're going to release the game kind of randomly on PS4, and Square Enix has been all over these digital releases. We brought up Saga Frontier, that just randomly came out, so I mean, who the hell knows? That The World Ends With You is a bigger game than Saga Frontier. I can tell you that much. Finally, number 13 is a wrap up, and it's longer than this in recent weeks. The official PlayStation blog reports adventure game Wanderer is coming to PSVR in the third quarter of this year, and skating game Ollie Ollie World is coming to both PS4 and PS5 this winter. You guys might remember Ollie Ollie was one of the very early third-party hit Vita games, and what's that team called? Team 7 or something like that?
Yeah, Team 17 or something.
Team 17, I think.
I don't know.
Website Gamatsu reports unique action game Aerial Knights Never Yield is coming to PlayStation 5 on May 19th. Adventure game Beautiful Desolation comes to PS4 on May 28th. Photography game Beast of Maravilla Island, which looks really cool, comes to PS4 in June. 2D JRPG Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights is coming to PlayStation 4 on July 6th. Adventure game Last Stop is coming to both PS4 and PS5 in July. That's the new game from the people that made Virginia, which I was a really big fan of. Motorcycle racing game Rims Racing is coming to PS4 and PS5 on August 19th. Co-op game Kiwi comes to PS4 and PS5 in August. Murder mystery thriller The Forgotten City is coming to both PS4 and PS5 sometime this summer. And both farming sim Kataria Fables and anime game Lost Ruins are coming to PlayStation 4 by the end of the year. Website Push Square reports Pirate RPG, or as they said, RPG. King of Seas is coming to PS4 on May 25th. That game looks really fucking cool, by the way. People want to go check that out. I think that game looks really neat. Puzzler Call of the Sea is coming to both PS4 and PS5 at some point in May. Action game Fallen Knight is coming to PlayStation 4 on June 23rd. Racer F1 2021 is coming to both PS4 and PS5 on July 16th. That's the first time EA will be publishing a Codemasters game, so a little piece of history there for you, in case you're curious. RPG Chris Tales is coming to PS4 and PS5 on July 20th. Both card battling RPG Rise of the Slime and adventure title, I already brought up Last Stop earlier, I'm sorry, coming this summer. Ex-PlayStation first-party series WRC is coming to PS4 and PS5 on September 2nd in the form of WRC 10. And both alternate history game Aztec Forgotten Gods and sim game YouTuber's Life 2, Chris, which we did our Let's Play for the original back in the day, are coming to PS4 and PS5 at some point later this year. And finally, the official Assassin's Creed social media feeds revealed that the upcoming Wrath of the Druids expansion for Valhalla has been delayed until May 13th. Just real quick about the that Aztec Forgotten Gods game. It's Aztec, like tech TECH. It's cool. It looks really neat. It's about as if the Europeans never came to South America, and the Aztec Empire like kind of flourished on its own.
That's interesting.
And so pretty cool. By the way, before we move on, did you guys see the controversy that's been brewing about this game, this Indian revenge game?
This is our land.
This is our land, or something like that. And that game, so people are upset because it's made by a Polish team, and it's basically just an Indian revenge fantasy, and it has like no respect for like indigenous culture or whatever as far as like who it is. But I'm like, that game sounds dope. Basically, like you just play as an Indian and you kill settlers. I'm like, that's so why. If game journalists don't want that game, I don't know what game they want. There's no pleasing you.
Yeah.
If you don't want that game. That game sounds awesome.
It's pretty. Yeah, I had a friend of mine send me. It's like this would make a really good video. So I've been researching it and diving into the lore of this, because this has been going on for a while apparently. So. Yeah,
it's a couple of years old. It's in early access. You can also tell that there's just games media has no research capability and no originality because someone found it, wrote about it, and then everyone wrote about it as if it was new. Yeah. And I was surprised when I went to Steam to look at it. I was like, oh, it came out in like 2019 or something. Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so, but I love the idea of an Indian revenge fantasy. That's dope.
Yeah, it is really
Bring
cool.
that shit to PlayStation. I'll play it.
It's like a Tarantino movie.
All right. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like a Tarantino movie. And I love the name.
Yeah.
This is our land. That's a fucking dope name. Everything about it's great. All right. Tradition dictates, as you know, boys, and as the listeners know, 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas end each episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. You submit those inquiries on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia, and I pick them out. We'll start with Gustavo Ochoa, who wrote in and said, I finally had the chance to try out the PS3 emulator on PC, and although it is still rough around the edges, it is truly a magnificent example of reverse engineering. Oop, I got dark again. The sun went down. Let me make myself brighter again. There we go. I got to get like curtains in here, so I'm not so dependent on. I'm gonna do that. Give it about a month, and I'll make that happen. Back to Gustavo. How is it that an open source emulator founded and developed by only 2 dudes is able to get things running, and yet the engineers at Sony who freaking made the cell processor to begin with cannot achieve something similar? With all due respect, are PlayStation engineers truly this incompetent? Or is this merely a sign that Sony is choosing to not invest in backwards compatibility, despite the fact that it has been proven as possible by a passionate duo of developers? Hope you all are doing well. So at the very top, I always say, and we've said this many times, I'm not your dad. You can do whatever you want with piracy. I don't endorse it. I wouldn't pirate PlayStation 3 games. It's too new of a console. I think it's obviously illegal, but I think the philosophical, principled aspect of it is also quite debt-ridden. So I think you should be careful about that. But I wanted to talk about this, Chris, because Gustavo brings up an interesting point. Whatever bullshit Sony has been feeding about cell processor not working on an x86 or like x86 PlayStation, PS4, PS5 architecture is clearly not true. Now, people have written into me and tried to explain it to me, and I'm a layman. I'm a fucking idiot, I know, with this stuff. But people have tried to explain, like, well, it's more complicated, this, that, and the other thing. But is it? So Chris, do you think Sony's just intentionally holding this back? Because I kind of wonder, it can't be incompetence. This is a multinational technology corporation. They make hardware. I know that can they really not figure this out? I mean, it's impossible to believe that they can't.
I would say it's more likely that they just don't see the value in it, and which is, by the way, is also baffling. But I wouldn't necessarily rule out some degree of incompetence, because like, while this is Sony and this is like a big company, this is like obviously like a company that has a lot of their software in working order, but this is also the same company that linked your vanity name to your actual stats to the point where like you couldn't change your name without destroying a lot of like your trophy lists and a lot of your like continuity on the platform, which is, by the way, like something that like literally every other site and platform that has usernames has been able to figure out. So I do think there's like potentially like some level of just we can't figure it out, but I think it's more likely that they just haven't really put anybody on a project to figure it out in the first place. The fact that 2 people are able to figure this out with reasonable success for free tells me that all they need to do is pay people to do this, and they'll do it. They're just not doing it for reasons that I can't understand.
Yeah,
which is worse almost.
No, definitely. And then cynic in me, Chris says, and Dustin, I'll be interested to throw this over to you now. The cynic in me says they want to sell the games again.
Yeah.
And they're maybe like, I feel like I feel like what is going to end up happening is that the backwards compatibility thing with PS3, if they ever make it happen on PS5, is just going to be all digital, unassociated. So very Wii-like or DS-like to Wii U and Switch, where things started to actually be saved. Remember, if you bought virtual consoles on your Wii, they were locked to that Wii. They weren't even locked to your name because there was no name. So things have changed. But I do wonder if they're just... It used to be the theory back in the day, like, why are you giving us God of War again and Sly Cooper and Ratchet and Clank and all that? They want to sell these games again. And the cynic in me says that backwards compatibility is shut off primarily, or at least partially, because they're afraid that they will remove their ability to sell those games. What do you think?
Yeah, the comment, I'm looking into this now because I'm looking at the compatibility list of this emulator, and it's really not so great. They have 149 games listed on their compatibility list, and only 60% of them you can play start to finish. And of that list, it seems like that list is the least intensive games. Like if you go further down, it's like none of the Call of Duty games are playable start to finish on that emulator. Mm-hmm. I would say, from my limited technical knowledge, this is definitely a much harder task to get PS3 games running in an emulation sense than getting 360 games running on other, the newer Xbox systems. So I'm not saying it's not impossible. Like he said, these 2 dudes were able to get something going. So surely a team of Sony engineers would be able to get this working. But then again, like I said, this is Sony and software, which we know from history, not always so great when it comes to the technical aspects. I think Chris is right on the money, though, that this is just not something they're interested in. And Colin, you said that they'd rather sell them again. So why invest all this time? Also, if the data is there, this is something that they've said in the past as well, that it's just, as much as people like to say they love backwards compatibility and really enjoy it, and the people in our space talk about using it, potentially the data shows that that's only something that people in the inner circle really care about. That's something we have to consider, is the overall perspective, not just the people that are really in the industry or really care about games and what they want.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. there's no mystery with the data. They have it. This is why they were comfortable removing PS2 backwards compatibility from PS3. This is why they were comfortable removing Linux support, although they got sued over that. Because they said, I mean, they were like, no one uses it. Like, we know it's not like an anecdote. We're not telling stories we can see that no one uses this stuff, but I still think it matters that it exists. But let me throw this next one over to you, Dustin.
Sure.
Brogan Ryan Byrne wrote into us and said, hey, CCD, do you guys keep lists or use apps to track what games you own or what games you want to buy? I've been doing so for a while, but I'm starting to find it's causing me more stress than anything else. I force myself to play a game I'm not in the mood for because I'm chasing the adrenaline of making my backlog smaller rather than playing something I'm excited to play. I feel like I end up wasting what little free time I actually have. I'm considering deleting my game tracking app and just playing what I feel like playing and buying what I want to buy. If I forget about something, then so be it. Probably wasn't worth remembering, I guess. What do you think, Dustin? What do you think about this? This is I feel this because I have the OCD tendencies as well.
So I'm not interested in tracking games for as far as a completion. I know that there are many services out there that offer that, like you can put your status like beat 100% completed or like in progress, so you can have like an organization of your backlog. I would never in a million years want to see what my backlog looks like laid out on a list, potentially with some of these sites saying how many hours it would take. That sounds awful. Because, again, I think he said here that, like, he's forcing himself to play games that he doesn't even want to play because of the backlog. You know, I don't want to judge anyone's tendencies. Maybe it's a little bit of OCD or something like that compels you. But we've talked about this. You got to play what you're feeling compelled to play. What's the point if it feels like a job?
That's what we do on the show, for this show, by the way.
Right.
Like, that's the directive for our own show, is to never play games we don't want to play, even if they had just come out.
Right. So I don't recommend that. As far as my interest more is from the collecting aspect and being able to, like, catalog your collection, maybe find out if some of your games are rare or not. The app that I'm currently using is called GameEye, which is GAMEYE. And it has a really nice feature where it has a barcode scanner. So you can just like line up all your games and be like, boop, 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 and catalog them all. It'll tell you their value, which I learned like specifically when I was cataloging my games, the Pokemon Soul Silver Remake, which I have complete. I have the outer box, the Pokewalker and stuff. It's like $300 now.
Nice.
And even
Very
some
nice.
of my PS4 collection, like Gravity Rush, when they did the remaster of that, the disc of that is really rare because it was an Amazon exclusive. So if you're into that type of thing, if you're a game collector and you enjoy the stats and the numbers, check out GameEye. I don't know if it's for iPhone and Android, but I'm using it on my iPhone and it's been really good.
Yeah, it was. Well, I wanted to read that just because I feel you, Brogan. Like, as a trophy guy, I have a similar affliction. It's just not. It's not the same affliction, but they're parallel. It's like AIDS and HIV. All right. Wow. I'll take this next one. Brian Watkins wrote in and said, hey, CDC, this one's for Colin. What's the deal with hidden trophies? I've never been a trophy hunter, but recently I've been playing Control on the PS5 and it's becoming one of my all-time favorites. Out of curiosity, I popped onto the trophy list and I was pretty close to getting that platinum. As I was scrolling, I noticed 3 hidden trophies and this bewildered me. Why the fuck would trophies be hidden? Doesn't that defeat the goddamn purpose? Sorry if I'm coming off ignorant on the matter, but I just thought this was wild. That's for you, Chris. Keep up the amazing work, gentlemen. So, hidden trophies exist. We go over this every once in a while, but hidden trophies exist to hide story spoilers. The big thing back in the day, people might remember on PS3, is that you could not do anything to see the trophy until you got the trophy or went online and looked it up. So at some point they gave you the ability, and you can see this, who wrote this in, Brian, as you scroll through, just hit the options button and it'll say show hidden trophy, and then you can see it so you know what it is. But that's usually done to obscure people from getting things spoiled, and we utilize them in our own games as well. So you don't sound ignorant. It's just the way it is. And I'm sure Chris is very pleased that you are enjoying Control as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep earning those trophies, my boy. Very proud of you. James O'Halloran wrote in and said, "Hi guys. I know this topic has been discussed to death, but as we approach the release of Returnal, I can't seem to convince myself to justify the new €80 price tag for the first-party Sony games here in Ireland. Speaking as a guy who bought games day one for the past 20 years, I fear that I would only go to that price point if the game review score is high in the 9s. Even as a lifelong Ratchet fan, it kills me to say I will not be buying the new adventure day one. With the introduction of Game Pass and the incredible value that is offering, do you think Sony needs to reconsider their current pricing structure? It seems that they are sending Returnal out to die." Chris, I want to call this actually with all three of us now before we play the game, because we have no idea how it's going to be. I mean, I assume the game's going to be great. I mean, that's my working knowledge of the game, is that it's going to be great. But I don't think it's going to sell very well. And I'm wondering how you think this game is going to do commercially, Chris, based on the high price tag, and when we might see a price drop, because Sony, unlike Nintendo, as we always say, has a propensity to drop prices quickly based on market demand. So what do you think about Returnal's €80 price tag, $70 here in the US? I think it's £60, something like that. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely going to hurt it. You know, I think in general, we're just not used to paying that much money for games still. I think maybe some of us are, but I feel like a lot of us, for the entirety of this new generation so far, we've probably been coasting on a lot of backwards compatible stuff. We've probably been coasting on PS4 games that we already own. We've probably been coasting on even just PS Plus games or the PS Plus collection that they gave out, or even over on the Xbox side of things, you've probably been coasting off of Game Pass. So I think an $80 price or an €80 price tag, it's probably going to be a turnoff for a lot of people. I think it's probably going to be a shock to some people who probably haven't been paying attention to the storefronts in a while. And I don't know. I think it's probably going to sell all right. It's a new game on PS5, which people are itching for in general. I think my concern is PlayStation has done such a good job at kind of carving an identity out for itself as like the place where you go for narrative, really deep, serious, highly polished narrative experiences. And I wonder if the fact that this game doesn't seem to be one of those, and in a lot of ways is kind of proudly not one of those, I wonder what that'll do for your average kind of consumer, because I feel like your casual people probably aren't playing stuff like Returnal anyway, and the hardcore people are probably going to be curious as to what this game from Housemarque is, because they probably haven't played, their twin stick shooters in the past, So I'm curious as to how this is going to go.
Yeah, me too. I mean, Dustin, I feel like the one thing benefiting this game, regardless of the price point, is that there's just nothing to play. So I feel like the game's going to sell better just because of that. I think it's going to sell maybe substantially better because of that, even at the high price point, because people are so hungry.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, Dustin, and I don't know if I don't want to sound like from an ivory tower, but I'm kind of getting sick about hearing, and I guess I'll only speak about it from the American point of view, but the jump from $60 to $70 is not that big of a deal. I mean, we're making it out to be a huge deal, but $10, if $10 is going to make or break your ability to buy games on a regular basis, then I think you should buy way fewer games, because you have a pretty tumultuous financial situation. It's not to say that you should be going in and buying 4 or 5 games at $70 a piece, and then that extra $10 a piece turns into $50, and that is a substantial amount of money. But I also feel like people are just kind of, it's a little whiny, and I don't want to come off as above it all, but it just comes off as whiny. It's like, and I'm not saying this particular message does, but what do you want? Do you just want to continue to just pay the same amount of money for games forever, even though they're getting better, even though the value of the dollar and the pound and the euro is devaluing and eroding? I just don't get what people want. What do you think? Yeah,
I don't really know. I'm kind of a bit mixed on the pricing. In some ways, I think that, there's a larger market. So I think that's kind of what sustained that $60 price. As the market expanded, there was more people to sell games to. But it's interesting, because if you think about it, we got a price jump from 50 to 60, at a time when the dollar had much more value than it does now because of inflation. So the $10 price increases, as far as dollar value, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's the $10. Yeah, absolutely. The $10 price jump is not $10 in real value in comparison to the $50 to $60 price jump when $10 was worth more. That's what you mean.
Right. And also, yeah, exactly. And Colin, you've brought up before, like Super Nintendo game prices. Just look up a KB Toys or Toys R Us catalog of Super Nintendo games at launch, and you're going to be like, whoa, maybe that's not so. That $70 is not so bad.
Yeah, because you were paying $70 for Zelda in 1992, you know,
right?
And that was $70 then.
Right.
I think in 1992 the national minimum wage was like $3.75 or something. So just put that into context. Not that you should be making the minimum wage, but you understand.
Right. So as far as Returnal, man, people are getting I've gotten a weird like feeling from the fans about this game, in that I've had people send me, there's this guy Lance McDonald. He is well known in the like coder, like more engineering aspect of games. He's the one that did the Bloodborne 60 FPS hack.
Oh, wow.
On a live stream, this became news. He said that he heard that Returnal was really, really good. And so presumably he knows someone that is reviewing the game right now who said it was good.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well,
you know?
The thing about it that I just think is weird, it's like, okay, the guy that did the Bloodborne hack said that he knows someone who said it was good.
Returnal is good, yeah.
So that's...
I take that at face value, though. I'm going to be shocked if the game's not great. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of if anyone cares. I mean, there are plenty of great games no one gives a shit about, so it's not like...
Yeah.
You know, we'll see. But I'm confident in I'm going to say certainly in the 8s on Metacritic. I have no doubt about that.
Did you see there was a trailer that dropped yesterday?
No, I'm now bowing out. I don't want to see anymore. I've seen enough. You know,
I'll just say it was pretty good.
I'm sure it was.
I'm
dude.
excited.
I mean, the game, when we finally saw gameplay, I was like, this looks awesome. I mean, this is exactly what a Housemarque game would look like in 3D. I mean, you can tell. You can just tell the way the bullets come out and the way it's all structured. It looks like fucking. It looks like Super Stardust. You know, like
surprisingly, cool. Actually, the more I see of the gameplay, I'm like, this kind of seems like it's maybe a Chris game more than any of us. It's looking very kinetic. It looks, dare I say, third-person Doom in some aspects.
Looks a little bit like it, yeah. That new trailer is really, really good. And I think it is probably going to be really good. I think what you said, Colin, though, is like was a good point. It was like it's going to be a good game, but like, will people care? Because there's a lot of great games that people just like. I thought the Pathless was fucking excellent, and nobody gave a shit. You know.
Yeah, it was surprising. That game just came and went. I agree.
Yeah, and you know, there are other things that like are a bit like more niche. Like obviously, like Death Stranding was like a big like divisive title, and but yeah, I wonder if people will care about it, and because if people don't, and it's good anyway, that's kind of a big deal, because this is like the only PS5 game that's launched really so far, like exclusive since launch.
Yeah, like a new game. Yeah, you're right, because Demon's Souls is a remake. I mean, we've said, you know.
Yeah. So the idea of like this game coming out and being good but not making waves, which is very possible, that's kind of a dire situation, you know? Until you get Ratchet to kind of pick things up, but I don't know. I think it's going to be good. I have no reason to, because that last trailer, the one that Dustin's talking about, is really good. It's the one that's got me most on board with it.
Yeah, I don't want to see any more personally.
It's fair.
I think I've kind of seen too much. Matt Hamill wrote into us and said, "Hey, Colin, Chris, and Dustin. I listened to the Game Maker's Notebook, a great podcast. If you aren't familiar, that's what he says. I'm not endorsing it. I'm sure it is good. Interview between Insomniac's Ted Price and Naughty Dog co-president Evan Wells this week. When discussing the development of the original The Last of Us, Wells noted that Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann spent a bit of time working on a new Jack game before shelving it in favor of The Last of Us. Colin, I've heard you voice disdain for those that wish Naughty Dog to return to Jack, but what do you think Naughty Dog would look like today if they continued with Jack after Uncharted 2, like the project that they were working on? Personally, I think it would have been interesting to see a post-Uncharted spin on Jack, though I don't think giving up The Last of Us would have been a fair price to pay. Loving the pod, keep up the good work." So that's what came to mind for me, Chris, was first of all, you don't get The Last of Us if they make the Jack game. This isn't necessarily news, though. It's funny how like old things are forgotten and then they're brought back up and people are like, oh, this is news. This is in the history of Naughty Dog that I wrote, that they had Jack and Daxter running and on PS3, and that one of the reasons why they didn't want to do it was because Jack looked creepy. I don't know if people remember that story, is that like Jack looked too real, like on the like rendering on the Uncharted engine or whatever, the Project Big engine. And so that was part of the reason apparently that they didn't do it, was that it didn't look right anymore. Like the aesthetic, the cartoony aesthetic apparently just didn't resonate. And so they moved on to The Last of Us. And I'm so thankful for that, Chris. But
yeah,
what do you think? I mean, you're more amenable to these types of games than I am. I am of the mind that Jack and Daxter would be a complete waste of time for Naughty Dog today. But Naughty Dog in 2009 is a different Naughty Dog than it is today. What do you think would be the situation with them if they stuck with Jack instead?
I think it would be very interesting. We definitely wouldn't have gotten The Last of Us, which I have mixed feelings about now that we're getting it for the third time. I still can't. This is the thing. It's like I would definitely rather see a new Naughty Dog Jack and Daxter game than The Last of Us 1-3. You know, like without a doubt. Like I would right. much prefer that. But you know, I also think the excuse of that he looked weird in the new engine's a bit weird, given that we have PS5 games that are really stylized and look amazing.
That's the way it was explained to me, and I never saw the model, so I can't speak to it.
They should put that out. I would be really. I bet the world would love that. But
I would love that. See, a cool Sony would do that.
Yeah,
you know, just like a cool Sony would have done. You know, when Santa Monica canceled their game, they would have eventually let them talk about it. A cool Sony does that, but not this Sony.
Yeah, they would have posted it on Twitter or something and like had like a whole. It would have been like a whole big deal. It's like when...
Yeah, it would have been awesome. I mean, why not? Why not celebrate Jack and Daxter? God forbid you celebrate your past.
It's like when Rare showed the first day of Sea of Thieves and it was just all these pills with like googly eyes on a boat. I love seeing shit like that, like unrefined stuff. But look, I don't know. I think it would be far more interesting to see that today, but I don't know. It's hard for me to say because that doesn't necessarily negate the possibility of them just going this route anyway after Jack and Daxter. You know, I do think them going backwards is not the best move. I wouldn't really necessarily, which is exactly why I have a problem with The Last of Us again. But, you know, if they're going to make a Jack and Daxter game, I would much prefer something in the style of Jack and Daxter that is new. Like something that's, you know, stylized and looks, you know, not realistic, just like very, very hyper focused on artistic expression and just aesthetic design. And that's what I want out of Naughty Dog going forward. And it's depressing to imagine that we're just going to get this grim, dark Naughty Dog for the next 10 years.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows? Because it's interesting, even like in the more pulpy Uncharted series, they tried to offload that. So the whole genetic code of Naughty Dog has changed, and I think it's for the better. I mean, Dustin, are we ever going to stop hearing about Jack and Daxter? I think the only answer to this, frankly, is to just let someone else make Jack and Daxter, which is something that I don't understand why they just haven't done. Like, just why not? Remember, Sanzaru made Sly 4. It's not like you needed Sucker Punch to do that, and Sly 4 is excellent. So you can get someone to make Jack and Daxter and just finally shut everyone up. Right,
and someone else has made a Jack and Daxter game. It was Ready at Dawn. And so...
And they're gone. They're not an option anymore.
Yeah, I don't think they would be interested since they're so tech focused at this point.
Right, and Facebook owns them now, so they're out.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing, is that to me, this is a game at this point that is not for the mass market. This is for the fans. This is the nostalgia play. Throw a budget at it that is similar to, I don't know, the medieval remake. Yeah, that's exactly where that fits in. The interesting thing about that, the model, the newer Jack model in the Uncharted engine is interesting to me. There is like, you guys know about like there's the uncanny valley where it's like you make something look too realistic. Right. It's funny because even this has started to happen to Nintendo with Mario. Nick Robinson has a really funny video about how he's so bothered by, in Mario Odyssey, they made Mario have individual mustache hairs. He found it like deeply disturbing. It was like a deep investigation video. Highly recommend check that out. But yeah, it's like it's weird because they didn't have to make him. They could have a higher polygon count Jack without giving him realistic skin blemishes or something like that.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, what I want to see the model. I should have asked to see it because I think it was during an interview. I probably literally could have seen it if I asked, but
it's like it's like those like intentionally creepy, like hyper realistic renders of like cartoon characters. If you've ever seen those, like I'm sure you've seen them on the internet, where it's like just like photorealistic.
Like SpongeBob, they do that with SpongeBob, right?
Yeah, like or like photorealistic Homer Simpson, and it's just this like excruciating image. But yeah, like I don't know. That seemed like such a weird excuse.
The weird thing about that concept is that surprisingly recently we've seen that played out in a film that was huge, the Pokemon Detective Pikachu. They went for that realistic look, and I found it horrible, disgusting. And I don't know if that's just from growing up seeing 2D Pokemon my whole life, but I just can't deal with it. I even saw the movie and it was fine, but I just can't get over that aspect. But apparently the world was ready for
the furries
realistic.
want it. I think furries just want Jak and Daxter to come back. To be honest. Like who are we lying? Who are we lying to here? I mean, they're not as into Ratchet and Clank because half of them are, they can only fuck Ratchet, But with Jak and Daxter, they can fuck them both.
Oh, yeah, crime.
I mean, you could fuck Clank if you wanted to, but
yeah,
be
have fun.
Cool.
Jordan Reimer has the final inquiry today. He says, "Hey guys, is it too early to panic about Horizon Forbidden West hitting a fall 2021 release date? We are just over a few months out from that release window and have seen or heard virtually nothing about this game. With Xbox continuously giving consumers a reason to join their ecosystem and Halo Infinite around the corner, how important is it for Horizon Forbidden West to hit its target release date this fall?" Thanks. Chris, I feel like it's kind of important. I don't think it's as important as it was when Deathloop wasn't in that window. Now that it is, they have something. I still feel like part of me feels like they might do a Bethesda thing where they date this thing in a couple of months. They show a bunch of it. They're like, it's coming out October or November. And then, here is the game. But I can also, first of all, I think there's no chance God of War comes out this year.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was all about.
Chris
that was
right.
Yeah, Chris was right about that. I mean, that was strange from the get. And then I feel like it's a coin flip at this point with her. I'm kind of slanting towards not making it. And I feel like with Horizon, it's so important that this game is good that I feel like they should just take the extra time if they need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think it is important. I think especially, look, and I'm looking at this from like an optics perspective, right? It hasn't been the greatest couple months. Like they've had a lot. They've obviously the console's doing well as it can, given the, the lack of actual product to satiate demand. It's the titles have been great. Spider-Man was great. Demon's Souls is great. People like PlayStation generally right now. But I feel like the last couple of months have been just Xbox stealing a lot of thunder, like making a lot of power plays. Like it feels like Sony's got egg on their face a little bit. And they've had it for like a couple months now. And that's probably going to change with Returnal, and it's probably going to change with Ratchet. But fall is like important. It's very, very big, and you need something there. And I don't know if Deathloop is that thing for them, especially because, that's presumably going to Microsoft. That's that, even though that's like a Sony PlayStation exclusive game, timed or otherwise, those profits are going to Microsoft. Like they gotta get something in there. And I think Horizon, I think they probably are going to do like a Bethesda type thing with Horizon. I think it might hit the day, but they definitely need something to take the spotlight off of Halo, because I know Halo generally is like this title that's kind of like elderly at this point, and it's like kind of old school, and it's kind of seen as like people don't really care about it anymore. But this is a title that's going to be free to play on Xbox One, on the Series X, on PC, coming to Game Pass day one. This is going to be all over the place. Like, this is not like this is millions and millions of consoles and pieces of hardware that are going to have access to this with no barrier of entry. Whether you like it or not, this is going to be in the conversation for a while, especially if it launches and it's good.
Yeah,
which is,
I totally agree. It's what I said.
And that's a huge coin flip, like we don't really know. They're being pretty transparent about it, but we still haven't seen much from it. So like it could be like a complete wash, but they're going to need something in that fall window to have to be some part of the conversation. And I think Horizon is their best shot. I don't think God of War is coming. I'm curious as to why they just haven't officially delayed it at this point. There's no room for both of those titles anyway.
No,
I think
that's the thing. Is like, why would you even do that?
Yeah,
at this point,
but although that might be the strategy, maybe it's like a really bold, like, hey, Halo's out this year. Maybe we can get Horizon and God of War out. I don't think it's wise, but it wouldn't be the first unwise decision Sony's made regarding.
It could be too with God of War. I mean, we don't know. I mean, I assume God of War is cross-gen. We don't know that yet. But if God of War is PS5 only, then getting it out at around the same time might not be as bad because one is cross-gen and will be considered largely a PS4 game, which is what happened with Miles Morales. But I agree with what you said. And Dustin, the only other side of the coin I can think of is Halo is so big and so important. And Chris is totally right. I mean, the saturation of this game this fall is going to be unavoidable. That Sony might be like, we might not want to put Horizon out because it's not going to win. Like it's not going to win the optic war. It's not going to. It might be a better game. I would actually assume it probably will be as good of a game as Halo, if not better. We'll see.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that? Like, 'cause my whole thing with Deathloop, and people are talking about Ghostwire Tokyo as if that's coming out this year. I mean, there's no prayer that's happening, but remember, they lost their director in the middle of the project. I mean, it's a little bit of an upheaval there. I still feel like Sony, especially with Ghostwire, because it's further out, but if Sony could give those games back in quotes and let them be third-party games and get some sort of deal from Microsoft for future considerations, like we said a few weeks ago, I would prefer that they did that. But I still think Deathloop looks great, of course. But what do you think about what's going to happen here with Horizon and Halo in this fall? And when do you expect to see this game?
I can't recall what years, but we have seen during the PS4 generation Sony's strategy to be let everyone else go during the fall because there's just a flood of competition, whether it's new Call of Duty, new, yearly releases, stuff like that. So I could see them taking that strategy again in a way, but I agree with Chris in that I don't think this is the year to do that. In that, with I don't even think it's so much Halo in just that there needs to be the package deal, we'll say. Not even that it's a deal and that they need a bundle, but it's like, hey, you're getting a gift, or you're asking your mom or dad, whatever, or your husband or wife, whatever, is you want a PS5 and this is the new game to go with it, right? The package deal. So I'm still not entirely confident that Halo is going to be any good, unfortunately. I feel like that project has been a complete mess, and I have no confidence in 343. And they haven't really earned my confidence for any reason so far since they've had ownership of the Halo. Right. Not ownership, but they've been stewards of the franchise. So obviously, I'm not saying it doesn't have that marketing push and that X factor for Xbox this holiday, but I'm still thinking there's a big chance. Not a big chance. I don't want to seem too negative, but I think it's very much in the realm of possibility this game comes out and it scores 7s and 8s, which is, for Halo, doesn't cut it.
Yeah,
I'd love to be wrong.
The thing that I'm paying attention to is how Outriders performed on Game Pass, a game that is largely buggy and largely kind of like apparently like falls apart at the end game, right? This is a game that is a little bit unfinished. A lot of people argue it's not necessarily it hasn't reached like Destiny 2 levels of like general quality. But it's like really, really popular right now, specifically because Game Pass is so big. It's like one of the most talked about games, like in the industry in general, in part because of Game Pass. And it's like number 3 on like, I thought it was like number 3 on Xbox or something. And that was while it was not working.
Yeah, Benji Sales, I think, put that information out.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like Halo could come out and it could be busted, and it would still be a huge game, just because just the name. So like, it very well could be like a mess. I think it probably will be, especially because we haven't seen much of it. But they gotta have something for fall. They gotta have something. Yeah, well, in there.
The good news for Sony in that regard is that Microsoft must get this game out. So there's no more waiting for this. And they wanted to get this game out at launch, obviously, and they needed another year. So we'll see. I just wrote down in my notes here as we wrap up. I mean, if they could line this up, Sony's in pretty good shape. I mean, you have Returnal in April, Ratchet in June, Deathloop in September. And then imagine if you got Horizon in November and God of War exclusive to PS5 in February. It's pretty good.
That's pretty good, yeah.
But I don't know that it's going to quite work out that way. Horizon, of course, the original came out in February, and I think that was a really great time for it. I think what worked against it was it came out like a week before Zelda.
Yeah.
So, and yet it still thrived. So imagine what Horizon can do.
Totally.
If just given a little bit of time. So that's all we have for this episode, this lengthy episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. Chris, do you have any closing comments before we go?
I don't know. Have you guys gotten your vaccines yet?
Mine's scheduled for I'm getting the Pfizer one, and I'm getting my first shot on the 24th.
Nice.
So.
I got mine.
Did you get yours?
Ago. Yeah, I got the Moderna.
How you feel? Oh, nice.
And I'm feeling all right. My eyes bleed occasionally, but
no.
How's the 5G though?
The 5G is excellent. My phone's been like extra good.
Nice. Dustin, did you get it?
No, I haven't yet. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not in a rush, but I'm not against it either. You know, like I mainly work from home and I don't go out anywhere.
I just want it so I don't kill my parents. You know, I mean, they already got it. They're in their early 70s. I mean, they already got but who knows? I mean, I'm just, I don't know that I would get it at all if I wasn't risking exposing other people.
Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I just want to see, I would rather wait like a year and just see like who grows antlers and that kind of shit, you know? Dustin, do you have any closing comments?
Closing comments. I don't think so. I'm just very excited that this episode next week, bearing that you have me on, we'll be able to talk a little bit about the new Nier game because
we'll definitely have you on. So we can talk about Nier.
Yeah,
we have nothing else to talk about.
That's true.
Great.
Yeah,
it'll be out on Thursday, so I'm like gonna go and drive to Target and get it in the morning, like a big boy, getting a physical game.
Very nice. I'm happy for you. Finally, the games start coming soon. So,
right.
Well, thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show. We appreciate you very much. Remember, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access, the ability to submit questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas to the show. You get your name in the credits and all of the other things. If you want to be a scallywag, a lobster back, a freeloader, all of that, then by all means, listen to us on free feeds. Go to YouTube and listen to us there. Subscribe, leave us nice reviews, etc. You know the drill. Laststandmedia.shop for merch. That's it. We'll see you next time for more Sacred Symbols. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sick. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and Burbank, California, USA. The show was conceived by, is written by, and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Chris Raygun Maldonado. Sacred Symbols' executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.